Tonight, we are going to set down a burden that most of us have carried so long, we have stopped noticing its weight. It is the habit of being hurt twice by the same thing. Once by what happens, and once again by all the ways we turn it over in the dark. There is a kind of tiredness that has nothing to do with the body. It comes from the mind returning again and again to the places where it aches. Something happened today or many days ago, and the first hurt of it has long since passed. And yet here you are in the quiet of the night, and the mind reaches back and touches it once more, and it stings as if it were new. Tonight we let that second reaching soften. We will sit with something the Buddha noticed a very long time ago, watching the way pain moves through a human life. He saw that when something difficult arrives, we are struck not once but twice. The first strike we cannot always avoid. The second, he taught, is the one we add ourselves. And that second one, the one we fire from within, is the one we can slowly learn to lay down. Before we begin, feel free to share what time it is and where you are listening from. You do not need to know anything about Buddhism to rest here. You do not need to remember any of this in the morning. There is nothing to study and nothing to solve. These are old teachings, carried across many centuries by many quiet voices, and they ask nothing of you tonight except that you let them move over you the way slow water moves over stone. Take a soft, deep breath. Let your shoulders come down from wherever they have been holding. Let the bed take your full weight. Thank you for spending these quiet hours here. Let us begin. The Buddha once offered a simple picture to explain how suffering works, and it has stayed with people for more than 2,000 years because it is so easy to feel the truth of it in your own life. He said that when a person is touched by a painful feeling, it is as if they have been struck by an arrow. That first arrow is the pain itself, a loss, a harsh word, an ache in the body, a day that did not go the way we hoped. This first arrow is part of being alive. No one, however wise, however calm, escapes the first arrow entirely. To have a human heart is to be touched now and then by something that hurts. But then, he said, most of us do something more. Having been struck by the first arrow, we reach for a second one, and we fire it into the very same wound. We do this without thinking. We resist the pain and wish it were not here. We ask why it happened to us. We replay it. We argue with it. We brace against it. We tell ourselves long stories about what it means. And every one of those movements, he taught, is a second arrow, landing in a place already sore. So there are two arrows, and the whole of the teaching tonight rests in one gentle observation. The first arrow we cannot always help. The second one we can. Let that settle for a moment, because it is a kinder idea than it first sounds. It is not saying that your pain is your fault. It is not asking you to pretend that difficult things do not hurt. The first arrow is real, and it is allowed to hurt. What the teaching offers is something softer than that. It says that a great deal of what keeps us awake at night is not the first arrow at all. It is the second, and the second one is made of something we have far more say over than we usually believe. Let us explore a small story in this spirit. In a village at the edge of a wide, slow valley, there lived a woman who drew water each morning from a stone well near the center of the village. She was neither young nor old, and her days had the plain, good shape of most lives. She rose before the light. She swept the step. She carried the water. And one bright morning, As she leaned over the low wall of the well to lower the wooden bucket, a bee that had been resting in the cool shadow of the stone was startled, and it stung her once on the back of the hand. It was a small thing, a single sting. It hurt the way a bee sting hurts, a bright, sharp point of pain that flares and then, if left alone, begins almost at once to fade. This was the first arrow, unbidden, unavoidable. The bee had not meant her harm. The morning had not turned against her. It was simply one of the ordinary small hurts that a day can hold. But here is where the story becomes the story of all of us. The woman drew back her hand and looked at the red mark rising on her skin, and a heat came into her that had nothing to do with the sting. Why today, she thought. Why, when there is so much already to carry? She thought of the bucket she still had to fill, and the long walk home, and the ache that would sit in her hand all through the morning's work. She began to turn the small thing over. She remembered another morning, years before, when she had been stung as a girl, and how her mother had scolded her for crying. She felt the old smallness of that memory rise up beside the new sting, and the two of them together grew into something much larger than a bee. By the time she had carried the water home, her hand had almost stopped hurting. The first arrow had done its small work and was already leaving her, but the woman was not at peace. She was tender all over now, not on her skin, but somewhere beneath it, in the place where we keep our sense that the world should be gentle with us, and so often is not. She had been stung once by the bee, and she had been stung 100 times more by her own returning to it. Let us stay with her a moment, because she is not foolish. She's only human, and she's doing exactly what a caring, tired mind does. She's not wrong to have felt the sting. She's not weak for remembering her mother. This is simply what the mind reaches for when it has been touched by something sharp. It wants to make sense of the hurt. It wants to be sure it will not come again. And in all that wanting, it fires arrow after arrow into a wound that, left alone, was already beginning to close. There was an old man in that same village, a maker of baskets, who had lived a long time and had been stung by more bees than he could count, for he gathered reeds near the water where they nested, and a neighbour once asked him how he could sit so calmly by the reeds, unbothered, when the bees came and went around his hands. The old man thought about it for a while, the way people do when a question is better than they expected, and then he said, "When the bee stings me, it stings me once." He held up his withered hand and turned it in the light. "I used to sting myself all the rest of the day," he said. "Now I let the bee do its part, and I do not add mine. I let the bee do its part, and I do not add mine." There is a whole life of quiet freedom in that small sentence. He had not found a way to stop the bees. He had not hardened his skin or numbed his hand. He still felt the first arrow, the plain sting, as sharply as anyone. What had changed in him over his long life was that he had slowly, gently set down the second arrow. He had learned to let a small pain be a small pain, and to stop enlarging it with everything the mind wants to add. This is not a trick, and it is not a hardness. It is something much warmer than that. It is a kind of mercy we learn to offer ourselves, because the truth the old basket maker had discovered is the truth the Buddha pointed to under his tree so long ago, that so much of our suffering is not the wound itself, but the reaching back to the wound. The bee stings once, the rest we do. And notice gently that this is good news. If most of what keeps us turning in the night were the first arrow, there would be little we could do but endure it. But it is not. So much of what aches at midnight is the second arrow and the third and the 10th, all of them fired by a mind that only wants to protect us and does not yet know that its arrows are landing in our own soft skin. And a thing we are doing ourselves is a thing that can, in time, be done more gently, or not at all. You have felt this. You have known days when the first hurt was small, a word, a mistake, a plan that fell through, and yet you lay awake for hours while the mind drew its bow again and again. And perhaps you have also known, on some rare and quiet evening, the other thing, a day when something went wrong and you felt it, truly felt it, and then, almost without deciding to, you let it be what it was and no more. And how light the night was then, not because nothing had happened, but because you did not spend the darkness firing arrows into your own tired heart. That lightness is not a special gift given to calm people and withheld from the rest of us. It is a skill, the softest of skills, and it grows the way a path grows, simply by being walked. Tonight, and in the nights to come, we are only learning to notice the second arrow. That is all. Not to force it away, not to scold ourselves for firing it, for that would only be another arrow. Just to notice, with the same kindness the old man had for the bees, oh, there it is again, the reaching. And in the noticing, something in the hand begins, on its own, to open. There is another kind of sting, of course, one with no bee in it at all, and it may be closer to the ones that keep us awake. Let us follow it a little way. In the same village, there was a market on the last day of each week, and one morning, a young woman went to sell the cloth she had woven, cloth she had worked on through many long evenings by the light of a small lamp. She was proud of it, quietly, in the way we are proud of a thing we have made with our own hands. And as she laid it out, a passing trader glanced at it and said, without cruelty, only in haste, that the colour was old-fashioned, and walked on to another stall. That was the whole of it. A few careless words from a stranger who had already forgotten them by his next step. The first arrow was small, a moment's sting of disappointment, the kind that would fade on its own by the time she walked home. But the young woman took those words and carried them into her chest and began, there to fire. All through the market day she heard them again, old-fashioned. She looked at her cloth now with the trader's passing eyes and saw only its faults. She remembered other times she had been found wanting. She wondered if all her evenings of weaving had been foolish, if she had wasted the lamp oil and the hours, if the neighbours had always thought this of her and only been too kind to say. By the time she folded her cloth at dusk, a stranger's thoughtless half-sentence had grown into a verdict on her whole craft, and she walked home under a weight the trader never meant to hand her and would have been sorry to know he had. Here the sting has no honeymaker behind it. There is no bee to blame. The wound is made almost entirely of the second arrow, of the returning, the enlarging, the taking of 5 careless words and weaving them, as surely as she wove her cloth, into a heavy garment she then put on and wore. And notice how the mind reached, as it always does, past the small moment. It reached backward to other times she had felt small. It reached inward to make the passing remark a truth about her worth. It reached forward to imagine what the neighbours must think. The trader fired nothing. He merely spoke and moved on. All the arrows were her own, and every one of them landed in a heart that had done nothing wrong but make something with love. You have carried words like these: a remark, a look, a silence you are not sure how to read, small in itself and gone in a moment for the one who gave it, and yet turned over by you for hours, for days, growing heavier each time you touched it. And you are not foolish for this, any more than the young woman was. You are only a tender heart doing what tender hearts do. But you might see, tonight, how much of that weight was never given to you at all. It was woven, thread by thread, by your own returning. And a thing you have woven, you may also gently unravel and set down, and let the small first sting be small again, and already fading, and nothing more. Let us rest here for a moment. There is nothing to solve tonight, and no arrow you need to catch. If the mind has been reaching back towards some old sore place, you might let it, just for now, grow quiet. The way the woman's hand grew quiet once she stopped turning the sting over. Let the first hurt, whatever it was, be only itself, small, already fading, nothing added. Take a slow, deep breath and feel how much of the weight you carry was never the wound at all. When you are ready, we will go on together. There is more here than a single sting, of course. For the bee is easy. A bee stings and is gone, and the pain it leaves is honest and brief. But the arrows we fire at ourselves are cleverer than that. They come dressed as thinking, as remembering, as planning, as fairness, as the very effort to make things right. And in the quiet hours ahead, we will meet them one at a time gently, the way you might meet the different rooms of a house in the dark, letting your eyes adjust before moving on. We will look at how the second arrow hides inside our resistance, inside the stories we tell, inside our reaching back toward the past, and our leaning forward into what has not yet come. But that is for later. For now, there is only this quiet room, and your breath moving softly on its own, and the simple, freeing thing the old man knew. The bee stings once. You need not sting yourself all the rest of the night. Let the hand open. Let the small hurt be small. And let us rest here a while before we walk on. We come now to the first place the second arrow likes to hide. It hides inside our resistance, inside the part of us that meets a pain and says quietly, but with great force, "No, this should not be here. I want this gone." It is the most natural thing in the world, this resistance. When something hurts, we pull away from it. When a feeling is unpleasant, we push against it. The body does this on its own, and there is a wisdom in it. But the mind does it too, with feelings and thoughts and the shape of our days. And there the pushing does not always help. Sometimes the pushing is the very thing that keeps us caught. Tonight, we will look gently at the difference between a pain and our struggle against it, because they feel like one thing, tangled together in the dark. But they are two. There is the ache itself, and there is the tightening around the ache. The first may be beyond our reach. The second, slowly, is not. Let's explore a story about this. In a green country crossed by many rivers, there was a young man who was proud of his swimming. He had grown up beside the water and had crossed the wide, slow river near his home more times than he could count. And he believed, as the young often do, that the river and he understood one another. One late summer evening, he set out to swim to the far bank, where a festival was beginning and the lanterns were already lit among the trees. But the rains had come early that year in the mountains, and the river was higher and faster than he knew. When he reached the middle, where the water ran deep and dark, a current took hold of him. It was not a violent current. It did not pull him under. It simply began to carry him slowly and steadily down the river and away from the lights he had been swimming toward. And the young man did what any of us would do. He fought. He turned his body against the current and swam with all his strength back toward the bank he wanted, kicking hard, pulling at the water, his breath growing ragged. The current was patient. It did not fight him back. It only kept carrying him, and the harder he swam against it, the more quickly his strength poured out of him, until his arms were heavy and his chest was burning and the far bank was no closer than before. Fear rose in him then, and the fear made him thrash harder, and the harder he thrashed, the more tired he grew, and he began, for the first time in his life, to be truly afraid of the water he loved. Now there was an old woman who lived in a small house on the near bank, and she had watched the river for 60 years, and she had seen many strong young swimmers meet this current. She called out to him across the water, and her voice was not urgent. "Stop swimming against it," she said. "Let it carry you. Turn and swim gently across toward the bend, and the river will bring you in." The young man could barely hear her over his own thrashing and his own fear. Everything in him wanted to keep fighting toward the place he had chosen. But he was so tired now that he had no choice. He stopped. For a moment he simply let the current hold him, and he floated, and he breathed. And the strangest thing happened. Nothing terrible came. The river did not pull him down the instant he stopped fighting it. It held him, the way it had been holding him all along, and carried him on. And from that floating place, no longer spending everything on the struggle, he turned his body and swam softly across the current, not against it, and he let the water carry him toward the bend, and the river itself delivered him to the bank a little way downstream, tired but whole, among the reeds. Let us sit with him there in the reeds a moment, his heart still pounding, the lanterns glowing a little further off than he had planned. He had reached the shore, not the shore he wanted, but a shore, and a good one. And what had nearly drowned him was not the river. The river was the first arrow, the plain fact of the current, the thing he could not change by wishing. What had nearly taken him was the second arrow, the fighting, the refusal to be where he was. All that furious swimming against a thing far larger than himself. This is worth holding gently because it is so easy to mistake. We think that our struggle is what saves us. We think that if we push hard enough against a pain, we will push it away. And sometimes, with the things of the world, that is true. But with the currents that run through a human heart, it is often the other way. The grief we refuse to feel does not leave. It waits, and it tires us. The worry we fight does not quiet. It feeds on the fighting. The ache we cannot allow to simply be an ache becomes, through all our struggling against it, something much heavier and much harder to carry. The old woman's words were not, "Give up." They were not, "Stop caring whether you live." They were something wiser and softer than that. Let it carry you and swim gently across. She was not telling him to drown. She was telling him to stop spending his life fighting the shape of the water and to work with it instead, and to trust that a current he did not choose could still carry him somewhere he could stand. You know this current, not the river, but the feeling of being carried by something you did not ask for and cannot simply swim back from. a change you did not want, a sadness that arrived without permission, a night when sleep will not come and every effort to force it only pushes it further off. And you know the thrashing too, the exhausting inner swimming against what is already here. What is wrong with me? Why won't this stop? This should not be happening. Each of those is a stroke against the current. Each one, however understandable, pours out a little more of your strength into a fight the water was never going to lose. And so the practice, if we can even call it something so effortful as a practice, is the softest turning. It is the moment when, tired of fighting, you let the feeling hold you for a breath, and you find, to your quiet surprise, that it does not pull you under. The sadness, allowed to be sadness, carries you and moves on. The sleeplessness, no longer fought, loosens its grip almost as if it were only ever held in place by your resistance to it. You are still in the current. You have not conquered the river, but you are floating now and breathing. And from here, you can swim gently across to a place where you can rest. There is a gentler picture of this same thing, one closer to the bed than the river, and let us rest with it a moment before we go on. Imagine a traveller walking home along an open road when the rain begins to fall. Not a storm, only a steady evening rain, the kind that will not stop for hours. The rain is the first arrow, the plain fact of the weather, and it is not the travellers to change. But watch how two travellers might walk through it. The first hunches his shoulders against the rain and grits his teeth and hurries, tensing every muscle, cursing each step, fighting the water with his whole body as though by clenching hard enough he could keep it off him. And he arrives home wet anyway, as everyone does in the rain, but wet and also exhausted, sore in the neck and jaw, worn out not by the rain, but by the long fight against it. The second traveller feels the same rain and does not pretend to enjoy it, but somewhere along the road she stops fighting it. She lets her shoulders drop. She lets the rain be rain. She walks at an easy pace through the very same weather, and the water falls on her just as it falls on the other, and she too arrives home wet. But she arrives loose and unhurt, having spent nothing on a battle against the sky. The rain touched them both the same. Only one of them fought it, and the fighting, not the rain, was what wore the body out. This is the whole of resistance, brought down to a single evening road. So much of what exhausts us in the night is not the feeling itself, but the clenching against it. The hunched shoulders of the mind braced against a weather it cannot stop. The sleeplessness you fight is like the rain. Fighting it only tires you and keeps you wet. The sadness you tense against falls on you all the same, and takes twice as long to pass because you spent your strength resisting it. And the soft turning, here as in the river, is simply to let the shoulders drop, to let the rain be rain, to stop hunching against what is already falling, and to walk on, loose and easy, letting the weather do its brief work and move along. And notice, if you will, where this resistance actually lives, for it is not only a thing of the mind. It lives in the body, and the body will show it to you if you ask. Feel for a moment what happens when you brace against something. The shoulders draw up toward the ears, the jaw tightens, the breath grows shallow and high in the chest, or holds all together, the hands curl, the whole body gathers itself into a kind of clenched fist, as though it could squeeze the unwanted thing away. And it is tiring to hold a fist. Try it gently, even now. Close your hand tightly and hold it, and feel how quickly the holding begins to ache, how the tightness spreads up the arm, how something in you longs to let go. That ache is the second arrow made of flesh. It is what resistance feels like from the inside, and the relief, when at last you open the hand, is what the laying down of resistance feels like too. The fingers spread, the warmth returns, the ache dissolves, not because anything outside you changed, but because you stopped clenching. So much of the tension we carry into the night is exactly this. A fist we've been holding so long, we have forgotten it is closed. We brace against the day that was and the day to come. We clench against feelings we do not want, against the sleeplessness itself, against the very softness we are longing for. And the bracing does not keep the unwanted things away. It only tires us, the way the held fist tires, until we ache all over from a fight we never needed to have. But the fist can open. It can open now. Let it open slowly. Let the shoulders come down from where they have crept up toward the ears, down and back, into the soft weight of the bed. Let the jaw unclench, the tongue rest, the small muscles around the eyes grow smooth. Let the breath, which resistance holds high and tight, drop down low into the belly, and slow and deepen, all on its own, the way a breath does when a body finally feels safe. There is nothing here to squeeze away tonight. There is nothing to hold off. You may open every clenched place one by one, from the crown of the head to the soles of the feet, and let the holding go. And notice that this is not defeat. The young swimmer did not drown when he stopped fighting. He floated, and the river carried him home. The open hand is not weaker than the fist. It is only more at ease. It can still do everything the fist could do, and do it better, from a place of rest rather than a place of strain. So there is nothing to lose in the softening, and the whole tired night again. Let the current be the current. Let the feeling be the feeling. Let the sleeplessness, if it is here, simply be here, unfought, and watch how it loosens the very moment you stop pushing against it. You are not required to swim tonight. You are allowed at last to float. The very first place to practice this softening is the breath itself, for the breath shows us, moment by moment, the whole art of non-resistance. Watch what the anxious mind does to breathing. It grips it. It holds the breath high and shallow in the chest, or catches it, or hurries it, bracing as though danger were near even when we are safe in our own beds. That gripped and shallow breath is resistance made visible, the fight against the current happening right here in the body, breath by breath. And you cannot force a calm breath any more than the swimmer could force the river. The harder you try to breathe correctly, the tighter it becomes, but you can stop fighting it. You can simply let the breath go, hand it back to the body that has been breathing you faithfully since before you were born, and let it find its own slow way down into the belly, unforced, uncontrolled, carrying you as the river carried the swimmer once he stopped his thrashing. And here is the deepest turn of all, the one that matters most in the sleepless hour. So often, what we are fighting in the dark is the wakefulness itself. We lie down wanting sleep, and sleep does not come at once, and we begin to struggle against the waking, to push at it, to strain towards sleep as though we could swim to it by force. And the straining, of course, is the very thing that keeps us awake, for no one ever forced their way into sleep. It is a shore we reach only by stopping the swimming. Sleep comes to the one who has laid the fighting down, who lets the wakefulness be wakefulness for now, who floats in the dark without demanding anything of it. So if sleep has not yet come tonight, you might stop reaching for it. Let the waking be. Let yourself simply rest, without the goal, without the struggle, and let sleep arrive on its own, in its own time, the way the far bank arrived for the swimmer once he ceased at last to fight the stream and simply let himself be carried home. Let us rest here for a moment. If some feeling has been carrying you tonight, some current you did not choose, you might, just for now, stop swimming against it. You do not have to like it. You do not have to agree with it. Only, for this one breath, stop fighting the water. Let it hold you. Notice that you are still here, still breathing, not pulled under. There is nothing to push away tonight. When you are ready, we will go on together. The young man fought the river because he could see it. The current was out there in front of him, something clearly not himself. But the second arrow grows subtler still, for there is a kind of resistance that does not feel like fighting the world at all. It feels like thinking. It feels like understanding. It feels like telling ourselves the story of what has happened. And that quiet, reasonable seeming arrow is the one we turn to next. There is an arrow so quiet that most of us never notice it leave the bow. It does not feel like pain, and it does not feel like struggle. It feels like sense-making. It feels like the mind simply explaining to us what has happened, and what it means, and what it says about us and about the world. It is the arrow of the story we tell. Something occurs. That is the first arrow, and it is often quite small. And then the mind gathers around it and begins to speak. This always happens to me. Nothing ever goes right. They must not care. I should have known. And these sentences, arriving so fast and so smoothly that they seem like plain truth, are not the event at all. They are a story about the event. And it is very often the story and not the event that keeps us awake. Tonight we will watch, gently, the way the mind builds its stories, and we will see that a great deal of our nighttime suffering lives not in what happened, but in the telling. Let us explore a story about this. Two traveling merchants were making their way along a mountain road toward a market town, each with a cart pulled by a patient ox, each cart loaded with pots and cloth to sell. They had left at the same hour from the same village, and for most of the morning they travelled within sight of one another. And then, on a steep and stony stretch of the road, both carts struck the same deep rut at nearly the same moment, and on both carts a wheel cracked, and both merchants found themselves stopped in the heat of the day, far from the town, with a broken wheel. The first arrow had struck them both equally. The same rut, the same crack, the same afternoon sun. But watch now what each man did with it, for here the two roads part. The first merchant sat down in the dust beside his cart and put his head in his hands. Of course, he thought, of course this happens to me. It always happens to me. He thought of every other time the road had gone against him, and there were many, for he had a good memory for grievances. He thought of how he would arrive late, and how the best spots in the market would be taken, and how his rival, the other merchant, would surely be there already, laughing at him. He grew certain that the day was ruined, and then that the journey was ruined, and then, sitting there, that his whole trade was cursed and his life was harder than other men's lives, and that no one understood how much he had to carry. The wheel lay broken beside him, and he did not touch it. He was too busy with the story, and the sun crossed the sky. The second merchant looked at his broken wheel, and he felt the same first sting of it, the same sink of the heart, for he too had hoped to reach the market early. But he did not sit down in the story. He ran his hand along the cracked wood to see how bad it was. He remembered that there was a village not far back down the road where a wheelwright might be found. He unhitched his ox to let it rest in the shade, and he sat for a while in the shade himself, and he ate a little bread, and he watched the mountains, and he waited for the heat to soften before walking back for help. He was not happy about the wheel, but he was not at war with it either. It was a broken wheel. It was not a verdict on his life. By evening, both merchants had their wheels mended, for the same wheelwright served them both. They arrived at the market within an hour of each other on the same night and sold their goods at the same stalls. From the outside, their day had been identical. The same rut, the same crack, the same delay, the same late arrival. But one of them had spent the long afternoon in torment, and the other had spent it eating bread in the shade and watching the mountains. The difference between them was not in what happened. It was entirely in the story each one told about it. Let us stay with the first merchant a moment, because he is the one who needs our kindness, and because he is, if we are honest, the one most of us know from the inside. He was not a bad man. He was not weak. He was doing what a frightened, tired mind does, which is to take a single small event and weave it into a great cloth of meaning, and then wrap himself in that cloth until he can hardly breathe. Of course, this happens to me. That single sentence turned a broken wheel into a broken life, and the wheel all the while sat there, needing nothing but a walk back down the road. This is the arrow of the story, and it is perhaps the busiest arrow of all in the quiet of the night. For when we lie down and the day's doing is finished, the mind does not go quiet. It turns to its stories. It takes the small first arrow of the day, the awkward word, the unanswered message, the thing that went a little wrong, and it begins to build. And notice how the stories almost always reach past the event itself. They reach backward, gathering every similar hurt from the past to prove their case. They reach forward, predicting all the ways this will surely lead to ruin. They reach inward, turning a single stumble into a statement about who you are. This always happens. It will never change. There is something wrong with me. None of that is the event. All of it is the second arrow, and the third, and the 100th. And here is the gentle, freeing thing. You do not have to fight the story or prove it wrong. Arguing with the story is only another story. You need only begin to see it as a story. To notice, softly, the way you might notice a familiar voice in another room. Ah, the mind is telling its tale again, the one about how it always happens to me. And in that noticing, the story loosens, not because you defeated it, but because you saw it for what it was, a telling, and not the plain truth it pretended to be. The broken wheel returns to being just a broken wheel, small, mendable, nothing added. The story the mind tells is not always so grand as a ruined life. Often it is smaller and quicker, a tiny tale spun from almost nothing. And let us follow one of those, for they are the ones that visit us most. In a house of learning, there was a young student who studied under a teacher he admired greatly. And one morning, the student handed in a piece of work he had labored over, and the teacher glanced at it and, saying nothing, frowned and set it aside and turned to the window. That was all. A frown, a silence, a turning away. But from that small seed, the student grew a whole forest before the hour was out. The teacher is disappointed in me, he thought. My work is poor. He must think I do not belong here. Perhaps he's thought so for a long time. Perhaps the others see it too. He walked through the rest of his day inside this story, hearing the frown again and again, certain now that his place at the school was slipping away, that he had shown himself at last to be the failure he had always secretly feared he was. He barely slept. He composed, in the dark, the words he imagined the teacher would one day say to send him home. And in the morning, gathering his courage, he asked the teacher if his work had displeased him. The teacher looked up, surprised. Displeased? He said. No, your work was fine. I frowned because a pain had caught me in my side that morning, an old trouble of mine, and I turned to the window to breathe through it. I had already forgotten. It was nothing to do with you at all. It was nothing to do with you at all. The whole forest, the sleepless night, the certainty of failure, the imagined dismissal, all of it had grown from a frown that was only a pain in an old man's side. The first arrow, the small sting of an ambiguous silence, was real enough, but everything that followed, the entire heavy tale, was the student's own weaving, fired again and again into a heart that had done nothing wrong. And notice how sure the story felt while he was inside it. It did not feel like a story. It felt like the plain and obvious truth, like simply seeing clearly what was there. That is the way of the mind's tales. They wear the mask of fact. And so much of what we suffer at night is exactly this: a silence we could not read, a message unanswered, a look we were not sure of, small ambiguous seeds, and from each one the mind grows its forest, almost always a dark one, almost always a story in which we are found wanting, and we lie inside these forests believing them true. But you might remember the teacher's side, and the pain that had nothing to do with the student at all. You do not know why the message went unanswered, or what the silence meant, or what lay behind the look. You know only the story you have woven, and a woven thing, seen for what it is, can be gently let down. The seed was small, the forest was yours, and it need not be true. The stories the mind tells reach in 3 directions, and it helps to see them plainly. For once, you can name a thing you are halfway to setting it down. They reach backward, gathering every old hurt that resembles this one, stacking them up as evidence that the tale is true. They reach forward, spinning out all the ways this small thing will surely lead to ruin. And they reach inward, turning a single stumble into a verdict about who you are. This always happens to me. It will never get better. There is something wrong with me. None of these is the event. Each is the mind reaching past the event into the past, the future, the self, and weaving there a cloth far larger and darker than the small true thing that started it. And here is what is worth knowing about that weaving. It happens fastest and thickest in exactly the conditions of the sleepless night. In the dark, with the day's doing finished and nothing to occupy the hands, the mind turns to its favorite work, which is telling. And it tells with such fluency, such speed, such an air of simple truth, that we almost never think to doubt it. The story does not announce itself as a story. It arrives wearing the plain clothes of fact. This is just how things are, it says. This is simply the truth about my life. And we believe it because it is using our own voice. And who would think to question their own voice in the dark? But you can learn gently to hear the telling as a telling, not to fight it, for fighting a story is only another story, only to notice it, the way you might notice a familiar voice drifting from another room. Ah, there is the mind telling its tale again, the one about how it always goes wrong for me, the one about what this must mean about me. And in that soft noticing, something remarkable happens quietly, without any force at all. The story loosens, it thins, it stops being the solid truth it pretended to be and becomes what it always was, a telling, one telling among the many that could be told about the same small facts. And the plain events of the day, released from the heavy costume of meaning the story dressed them in, settle back into being simply what they are, small, ordinary, already passing. So tonight, if the mind is telling you a story, you might simply say to it, softly and without unkindness, "Thank you, I hear you, but you are a story, and I do not have to believe you tonight," and then let it go on, telling if it must, the way a voice in another room goes on murmuring while you drift towards sleep, no longer holding you, no longer needing your belief, growing fainter and fainter as the quiet comes. There is one more thing worth seeing about the stories we tell, and it may be the most freeing of all. It is that we almost never actually know the truth behind them. When someone speaks shortly to us, we tell ourselves we know why, that they are angry, that they think little of us, that we have done something wrong, but we do not know. We were not inside their day. We did not see the burden they carried to that moment, the pain in their side, the sleepless night behind them, the trouble at home that had nothing to do with us at all. We take the smallest scrap of the visible and we build from it a confident story of the invisible, of what another person thinks and feels and intends, and then we suffer that story as though it were fact, when in truth it is only a guess wearing the mask of certainty. And so a great freedom lives in 3 small and honest words. I do not know. I do not know why they said that. I do not know what the silence meant. I do not know what tomorrow holds, or what that look was hiding, or what the real reason was. It sounds at first like a poverty, this not knowing, but it is a kind of wealth, for it is the door out of the dark story. The mind builds its unhappy tales precisely by pretending to know what it cannot know. And the moment we admit gently that we do not actually know, the story loses its foundation and cannot stand. The certainty was the second arrow. The honest not knowing is the laying of it down. You do not have to solve the mystery of why tonight. You may simply let it be a mystery, unknown and unfrightening, and rest in the wide and quiet space that opens the moment you stop pretending to know what you are never given to know. Let us rest here for a moment. If the mind has been telling you a story tonight, some long tale of what went wrong and what it means, you might let it, just for now, be a story and no more. You do not need to argue with it. You do not need to finish it. Only notice, gently, that it is a telling, and let the plain small facts of the day set down their heavy costume of meaning and rest as what they simply are. There is nothing to decide tonight. When you are ready, we will go on together. The stories the mind tells reach in 3 directions, and we have felt them all. They reach into the past, and they reach into what is coming, and they reach into ourselves. In the chapters ahead, we will follow each of these arrows gently to where it lands. And we begin with the one aimed backward, the arrow we fire into what is already done and cannot be changed, the long ache of returning again and again to the places behind us. Of all the arrows we fire at ourselves, The one aimed backward may be the most tender and the most tiring. It is the arrow of regret. It is the mind's return again and again to what is already finished, turning it over, wishing it otherwise, replaying it as though this time, if we look hard enough, we might find the door we should have taken. The past is unusual among our pains because it can only ever be a first arrow once. Whatever happened, happened and struck us in its hour. But then it is gone, complete, beyond all reach of our changing. And yet we return to it. We draw the bow and fire again into a wound that the world closed long ago. And we call this remembering, and we call it learning. And often it is neither. It is only the second arrow sent backward into the dark. Tonight we will sit gently with the ache of the past, and with the quiet possibility of letting what is finished be finished. Let us explore a story about this. In a town known for its pottery, there lived a woman who made bowls, and her bowls were prized, for she had a gift for the wheel and a patient hand at the kiln. One season, she labored for many weeks over a set of bowls for a wedding, the finest she had ever attempted, glazed in a deep river blue that she had spent years learning to fire true. And on the morning she opened the kiln, she found that one of the bowls, the largest, the centerpiece of the set, had cracked in the heat. A thin, clean crack ran from its rim to its foot. It could not be sold. It could not be mended. The weeks of work on that one bowl were simply gone. This was the first arrow, and it was a real one. She was allowed her disappointment, and she felt it fully, standing before the open kiln in the morning cold. That is not the trouble in our story. The trouble came after, for the woman could not set the cracked bowl down. She kept it on a shelf in her workshop where she would see it as she worked, and every day, many times a day, her eyes went to it. And each time, her mind ran back through the firing, searching. She should have loaded the kiln differently. She should have banked the fire lower on the second night. She had rushed the drying. She had chosen the wrong shelf. She fired the whole sequence again and again in her mind, night after night, as if by reliving it with enough attention she could reach back through time and save the bowl. She lost sleep. She grew short with her family. She began to dread her own workshop, that place she had always loved, because the cracked bowl sat there like a small judge, and she could not stop returning to stand before it. Now her old teacher, the potter who had trained her as a girl, came to visit one afternoon, and he saw the fine set of bowls, and he saw the cracked one on its shelf apart, and he saw the way her eyes kept going to it. He was quiet for a while. Then he asked her, simply, "How many times have you fired that bowl?" She thought it a strange question. "Once," she said. "It cracked in the first firing." He shook his head slowly and smiled, not unkindly. "No," he said. "You have fired it 1,000 times since, every night in there." He touched his own temple. "And each firing," he said, "has cracked it again, and cracked you a little too. The bowl was fired once, and it broke, and that was the kiln's doing, and the clay's, and not a thing you can now reach. But all the firings since have been yours, and they have made nothing but your own tiredness. You have fired it 1,000 times since." She stood with that for a long moment, and she understood at last that the cracked bowl on the shelf had cost her far more after the kiln than in it. The break itself had been a single loss, brief and honest. Everything since had been the second arrow, drawn and fired and drawn again backward into a morning that was already gone. That evening, She took the cracked bowl down from its shelf. She did not smash it in anger, for that too would have been a kind of fighting. She simply carried it out to the garden and set it beneath a tree, where in time it filled with rain, and a bird drank from it, and it became a small and useful thing again, holding water for whatever passed, and her workshop became her own once more. Let us stay with her a moment, because her mistake is one we all make, and it deserves gentleness, not scorn. She was not clinging to the bowl out of foolishness. She was clinging out of care. She wanted to have done better. She wanted to understand what went wrong so that it would never happen again. These are good wishes, the wishes of a devoted heart. But the mind took those good wishes and turned them into an endless backward firing, a nightly return to a locked door, and the care curdled into torment. The wanting to learn became only the wanting to have not lost, and that is a wish that can never be granted, and so it burns without end. This is the shape of regret. It is not the memory of the past that wounds us. It is the arguing with the past, the if only, the I should have, the endless refiring of a kiln that is long since cold, and it wears a mask of usefulness, which is why it is so hard to set down. It tells us that if we just go over it once more, we will finally settle it, finally learn the lesson, finally be safe. But the past does not settle by being refired. It settles by being allowed to be finished. And notice, tonight, how much of what pulls at you in the dark is aimed backward. The conversation you would give anything to have again. The choice you cannot unmake. The version of yourself you wish you had been. Each return is another firing of a bowl that broke long ago, and you are not a fool for returning. You are only a caring heart that has not yet been told it may set the bowl down. So let this be the telling. What is finished is finished. It was fired once. You need not fire it 1,000 times more. Letting go of the backward arrow is not forgetting, and it is not pretending the loss did not matter. It is simply ceasing to re-break what is already broken. It is taking the cracked bowl down from the shelf where it judges you and carrying it out under the open sky and letting it become, in time, a quiet thing that holds a little rain. Past can be that. Not a courtroom you return to each night, but a still garden you may visit gently and then walk home from, into sleep. Regret does not only mourn what broke. Sometimes it mourns a road not taken, a turning we cannot unturn, and this is its own kind of backward firing. Let us follow one more traveller before we rest. A man once set out on a journey through unfamiliar country, and he came to a place where the road divided in two, and he chose the left-hand path. It was an honest choice, made with what he knew, which was little. And some hours on, the left-hand road grew rough and long and led him far out of his way, so that he reached his destination tired and late. Now the journey was done, and he had arrived, and nothing more was required of him. But the man could not let the fork alone. All the rest of that day and into the night, he berated himself for it. "I should have gone right," he said. "I knew I should have gone right. What is wrong with me that I always choose poorly?" He walked the whole road again in his mind, standing once more at the fork, taking the other path, imagining the smooth and easy journey he was sure it would have given him. He built, in his imagination, a perfect right-hand road, and then he grieved that he had not walked it, though no such road had ever existed for him to know. An old traveller sharing the fire that night listened to him for a while, and then said, "Tell me, did you walk the right-hand road, No, said the man. Then how do you know it was smooth? Perhaps it too grew rough. Perhaps it was worse. Perhaps it crossed a river with no bridge, or wound through hills without water. You are grieving for a road you never walked, comparing the real road you took against a dream road you have made perfect in your mind, and no real road can win against a dream. You are not sorry you went left. You are sorry the world is not the smooth country you imagined. And that, he said, no fork could have given you. You are grieving for a road you never walked. The man sat with that by the fire, and something in him loosened. He had reached his destination. The left-hand road had brought him here, tired but whole. The right-hand road was not a road at all. It was a story of a road made flawless by his own longing, an unreal thing he had been beating himself against all day. And when he stopped comparing the true road to the dream one, the true road was simply what it had been all along, a long way that got him home. This is the deepest trick of regret. It does not only mourn a real loss, it invents a perfect alternative, a road we never walked, a choice that would surely have led to ease, and then it torments us with the distance between our real life and that flawless imagined one. But the perfect road is a phantom. We do not know that the other choice would have been better. We only know it would have been different, and the mind has painted it golden precisely because we cannot go there to see its mud. And so tonight, if you find yourself standing again at some old fork, grieving the turn you did not take, you might remember that you are measuring your real and honest road against a dream. The road you took brought you here, to this bed, to this breath. It was a real road. It got you home. And the other was never as smooth as your longing has painted it. There is a particular tenderness needed here, because the backward arrow so often disguises itself as something noble. It tells us that to keep returning to the past is to take it seriously, to honor what happened, to learn its lessons, to make sure we never fail that way again. And so we feel that to set the past down would be a kind of carelessness, almost a betrayal. But look closely at what the endless returning actually does. It does not teach. A lesson, once truly learned, is learned. It does not require you to relive the failure 1,000 times in the dark. The 100th return teaches nothing the first did not. It only reopens the wound and tires the heart and steals the sleep and makes you less able, not more, to live well tomorrow. For here is the quiet truth about the past. It is the one place in all the world where you are completely powerless and completely safe. Powerless because nothing you do now can reach back and change a single moment of it. It is finished, sealed, beyond the furthest reach of your hands, and safe for the very same reason, because a thing that is finished can no longer hurt you unless you carry it forward and hurt yourself with it. The morning you regret cannot touch you from where it lies, back there in the sealed country of what has been. It can only touch you through your own returning to it, your own reaching back to draw the bow and fire once more into a place the world closed long ago, so you might tonight begin the slow and merciful work of letting the past be finished, not forgotten, for that is not asked, and not approved, for that is not needed either, only finished. You might picture the thing you keep returning to as a room in a house far behind you on the road you have walked, a room with the door now gently closed. You do not have to burn the house down. You do not have to pretend the room was never there. You need only let the door stay closed and walk on and feel how the walking grows lighter the moment you stop turning back to stare at a door that leads only into what is already done. And to yourself, to the one who lived that past and did those things and made those choices with only what you knew at the time, you might offer the gentlest sentence of all. You did what you could with what you had. It is finished now. You may set it down. You have carried it long enough, and it has taught you all it has to teach, and there is nothing left back there that needs you tonight. Let the backward drawn bow rest in the grass. Let the door stay closed. Let the past be at last the past. It helps to see, gently, the difference between remembering the past and reliving it, for they are not the same thing at all, and only one of them wounds us. To remember is to look back at something from where you stand now, here, safe, in the present, the way you might look at an old photograph. The photograph cannot burn you. It is only an image held at a distance, and you are the one holding it. But to relive is something else. It is to step back inside the burning house, to feel the flames again as though they were present, to be there once more, helpless in the very moment of the hurt. And the mind, in the sleepless hours, does not gently remember. It relives. It puts us back inside the fire again and again, and calls it thinking. You may learn slowly to remember without reliving, to let the past be a picture you can glance at from the safe shore of now, rather than a fire you keep climbing back into. When the old morning rises up tonight, you might notice gently that you are not there anymore. That was then, and this is now, and now you are here, in this bed, in this quiet, in this breath, and the fire, whatever it was, is long since out. You can look at it from here. You do not have to walk back into it. The past cannot reach across time to burn the one who simply remembers from the safety of the present. Only the reliving carries you back into the flames, and the reliving tonight you may gently set down. Let us rest here for a moment. If your mind has been reaching backward tonight, refiring some old morning, some choice, some loss, you might let it, just for now, be finished, not solved, not justified, only finished the way the day is finished, the way a fired bowl is what it is. Take a slow, deep breath and set the backward drawn bow down in the grass. There is nothing behind you that needs you tonight. When you are ready, we will go on together. The mind that reaches backward also reaches forward, and often in the very same breath. Having refired the past, it turns to the unmade future and begins to dread it, to rehearse it, to suffer tomorrow tonight. And so the next arrow we follow is the one aimed ahead, into the day that has not yet come. If the backward arrow is regret, the forward arrow is worry. It is the mind's leaning out over the edge of tomorrow into a day that has not come and may never come as we fear it. It is the rehearsing of trouble before the trouble arrives. It is suffering a thing tonight that has not yet happened, and so, in a strange way, suffering something that may not be real at all. The forward arrow is perhaps the most common visitor to the sleepless hour, because the night is when the doing stops and the future has room to loom. There is nothing left to accomplish in the dark, and so the mind fills the empty space with what is coming, and it rarely fills it with ease. It fills it with the meeting, the bill, the outcome, the thing that could go wrong. And each rehearsal of the feared tomorrow is another arrow, fired ahead into a target that is not yet there. Tonight we will meet the worrying mind gently and see that so much of what it dreads, it is only borrowing from a day that has not yet dawned. Let us explore a story about this. In a dry country where the rains came only once a year, there lived a farmer who had planted his field with care and now waited, as all the farmers waited, for the season of rain to break the heat. But the rains were late that year. Day after day the sky stayed a hard, cloudless blue, and the earth cracked, and the young shoots in his field stood pale and thirsty, and the farmer began to be afraid. He was not wrong to be concerned. A late rain was a real thing, and a failed crop was a real hardship. That was the first arrow, the honest weight of an uncertain season. But watch what the fear did to him in the waiting. Each night he lay awake and walked in his mind through every ruin the drought could bring. He saw the crop failing. He saw the empty grain store. He saw his family hungry in the cold months, and himself unable to help them, and the shame of going to his neighbors to beg. He lived through the whole disaster, in detail, night after night, though not a single day of it had yet come to pass. He rose each morning already exhausted, having suffered a famine that existed only in the dark behind his eyes. And because he was so consumed with the future, he was not much use in the present. He walked his cracked field, wringing his hands, seeing only the coming ruin, and he did not notice the small things that the day actually offered. He did not mend the channel that would carry water to his field if the rain came. He did not tend the shoots that still lived. He was too busy in a tomorrow that had not arrived to do the quiet work of today. Now there was an old farmer whose land lay beside his, a man who had lived through many late rains and many good ones, and one evening he found his young neighbor pacing the dry field in the last light, grey with worry. The old man leaned on the fence and looked at the sky for a while. Then he said, "Tell me, has the crop failed?" The young farmer said, "No, not yet, but it will. I am sure of it." The old man nodded slowly. "Then you have not lost the crop," he said. "You have only lost every night's sleep between now and knowing. And that," he said, "you will not get back, whether the rain comes or not. You've only lost every night's sleep between now and knowing." The young farmer stood with that in the dusk. The old man went on gently. "When I was young," he said, "I did as you do. I lived every drought before it came, and I noticed, after many years, that most of the famines I suffered so completely in the dark never actually arrived. The rain came late, but it came, or it did not come, and the hardship, when it was real, was never quite the shape I had feared, and I met it in the daylight with my hands, not in the night with my dread. I had suffered 100 ruins to meet. In the end, only 1 or 2, and those I could have met fresh. So now," he said, "I do the day's work, and I mend the channel, and I let tomorrow bring what it brings. The sky is not mine to carry. The sky is not mine to carry." The young farmer went home that night, and he did not stop being concerned, for concern is only natural. But he began, a little, to set the future down when it grew dark. He turned his worry into the one thing worry can honestly become, which is care taken today. He mended the water channel so that if the rain came, his field was ready. And then, having done what the day allowed, he let the night be night. When the dread rose in him, he reminded himself gently, "The famine is not here, only the waiting is here, and the waiting I can bear." And in time, whether the rains were early or late that year, he slept. Let us stay with him a moment, because his suffering is one we all know from the inside. He was not foolish to think ahead. Thinking ahead is a gift. It lets us plant and prepare and provide. The trouble was not the thinking. The trouble was the living through, the rehearsing of disaster in full feeling again and again, as though by suffering tomorrow tonight he could somehow make himself ready for it. But dread does not prepare us. It only exhausts us before the test. It fires arrow after arrow into a target that is not yet there, and leaves us wounded and tired, facing the real tomorrow with less strength than we would have had if we had simply rested. And notice how the mind loves to disguise the forward arrow as wisdom. It tells us that if we worry hard enough, we are being responsible. It tells us that to stop rehearsing the disaster would be to invite it. But this is the arrow speaking, protecting its own place. The truth is quieter. What tomorrow needs from you is a rested mind and steady hands. It does not need you to have suffered it in advance. The channel is mended in the daylight with care. The night is for rest. You know this leaning out over tomorrow. You have lain awake and watched your mind walk again and again through a coming day, arranging its troubles, bracing for its worst turns. And perhaps you have noticed, if you look back honestly, how many of those dreaded tomorrows arrived softer than you feared, or never arrived at all, and how the dread brought you nothing but a stolen night. The feared thing is not here. Only this quiet room is here, and your breath, and the soft dark. Tomorrow will come in its own time, and you will meet it in the light with your hands. You do not have to carry the whole sky to bed with you tonight. The forward arrow is sharpest, perhaps, when it is fired not for ourselves, but for those we love, and let us follow it there a moment, gently. In a village by the sea, there lived a mother whose grown son had gone on a journey over the hills to another town, and he had promised to return by nightfall of a certain day. And on that day, as the sun went down and he did not appear, the mother began to be afraid. This was the first arrow, the honest, tender worry of a loving heart, and there is no shame in it. But watch what the fear did as the dark came on. She stood at the window, and with each passing hour she walked, in her mind, through a worse and worse tale. He has been hurt on the road, she thought. He has fallen. He has met with robbers. He is lying somewhere in the dark hills, hurt and alone, calling for me, and I cannot reach him. She saw it all vividly, as though it were happening, and her body wept as though it were true. She lived through his injury, his suffering, even his death, all of it complete and detailed, through the long hours of that night, though not one moment of it had happened. She suffered a grief that had no cause yet in the world, a funeral for a son who was, at that very moment, only delayed. And her son, in truth, had simply stopped to help a neighbour whose cart had broken on the road, and had stayed to share a meal, and had set out late, and was walking home under the same stars, tired and content, and thinking of his bed. He came through the door not long after midnight, and found his mother grey and trembling, worn to nothing, having buried him 12 times in the dark. And he was well. He had always been well. She had suffered the whole of a catastrophe that never came. She had always been well, her son, all through her grieving. This is the cruelty of the forward arrow when it is fired out of love. It feels like devotion. It feels like the very proof of how much we care, so that to stop the worrying can seem almost like a betrayal of the one we love. But the mother's terror did not protect her son. It did not reach him on the road or keep him from harm. It only emptied her, so that when he came home, she had no gladness left to greet him with, only exhaustion. Her love was real and good. The arrows she fired into the dark on his behalf gave nothing to anyone, and took a night from her that she could not have back. And you know this too, this worry that wears the face of love, the lying awake over someone dear who is not yet called, the imagining of every harm that could befall a child, a parent, a friend. And it is right to care. Caring is among the best things in us. But the imagining of disaster is not caring. It is only suffering borrowed against a tomorrow that has not come. A funeral held for someone who is most likely simply delayed, simply living their life beyond the reach of your sight. What love asks of you is not that you suffer its fears in advance. It asks that you be rested and whole and ready to meet the ones you love with gladness when they come through the door. The feared thing is not here. Most likely, it is not coming. And your worry cannot walk the road for them. It helps to see clearly what the worrying mind believes it is doing, because it always believes it is helping. It tells us that if we rehearse the trouble enough times, we will be ready for it. That if we imagine every way things could go wrong, we will somehow prevent them. That to stop worrying would be to drop our guard and invite disaster in. And so, the worry feels responsible, even virtuous, and we let it run night after night, believing it is a kind of preparation. But look honestly at what it actually gives you. Has a single one of those rehearsed disasters ever gone better because you suffered it in advance? Has the dreaded meeting, the feared conversation, the uncertain outcome ever unfolded exactly as your midnight mind predicted? Almost never. The worry does not prepare you. It only tires you so that you meet the real tomorrow, whatever shape it truly takes, with less rest and less strength than you would have had if you had simply slept. There is a plain arithmetic to this that the old ones understood. Nearly all the troubles we suffer in advance never arrive at all, and of the few that do arrive, they come almost always in a different shape than we feared, so that all our detailed rehearsing was rehearsing for the wrong thing entirely. And even the true troubles, when they come, are best met fresh in the daylight, with rested hands and a clear mind, not by someone worn thin from 100 sleepless previews. So the worrying buys us nothing and costs us everything it touches. It is a debt we take out against a future that usually never comes to collect. What worry can honestly become is care taken today. If there is something the coming day truly needs from you, some small thing you can do now to be ready, then do that thing in the daylight with your hands and let it be enough. Mend the channel as the farmer did, so the field is ready if the rain comes. And then, having done what today allows, let tomorrow be tomorrow. It is not yet here. It is not in this room. It is not in this breath. The feared thing exists nowhere at all, except in the mind that is building it, right now, out of nothing but the dark. So you might, tonight, gently call the mind home from the future it is rehearsing, home to this hour, this bed, this slow breath, this single quiet moment which is, if you look, entirely all right. Nothing is wrong in this breath. Nothing is wrong in this one. The catastrophe is not here. Only the soft dark is here, and the weight of your resting body, and the next easy breath arriving on its own. Tomorrow will come when it comes, and you will meet it then, in the light, with your hands. You do not have to carry it to bed. You may set the whole unmade future gently down, and let it keep until morning, and rest. Listen too, to the particular voice the forward arrow uses, for it almost always begins with the same two words. What if? What if it goes wrong? What if I fail? What if the worst comes to pass? And the mind treats these what ifs as questions that must be answered before we are allowed to rest. And so it labors at them all night, trying to solve a future that has not yet arrived and cannot be solved in advance. But there is a gentle answer that quiets nearly every what if, and it is simply this: then I will meet it then. What if the hard thing comes? Then I will meet it then, in the daylight, with my hands and my whole strength. As people have always met the hard things when they actually arrived. Not now, not tonight, not in advance, worn thin and sleepless. Then, for worry is a debt we take out against the future, and it charges a cruel interest. We pay tonight, in lost sleep and tightened chest, for a trouble that may never come to collect, and if it does come, we will have to pay again, in full, on the day it actually arrives. So the worry buys us nothing and charges us twice. You need not pay tonight for tomorrow. Whatever comes, you will meet it then, and you will meet it far better rested than the version of you that lay awake rehearsing it. Let the what if be, and answer it, if you must, with those 4 quiet words. Then I will meet it then. Let us rest here for a moment. If your mind has been leaning forward into tomorrow, rehearsing some coming trouble, you might let it, just for now, come home to this hour. The thing you fear is not in this room. It is not in this breath. Whatever must be done can be done in the daylight, with care. For now, there is nothing to prepare and nothing to brace against. Take a slow, deep breath and set tomorrow gently down. It will keep until morning. When you are ready, we will go on together. Behind the backward arrow of regret and the forward arrow of worry, there lies a deeper one, quieter still, that feeds them both. It is the arrow of refusing the way things are, the insistence that this moment, this loss, this delay, this life should be other than it is. And to that root we turn now. Beneath so many of our arrows lies a single quiet demand. It is the sense that things should not be as they are, that this moment is a mistake, that reality has somehow broken its promise to us, and that if we protest hard enough, it will correct itself and become the moment we wanted instead. It is a small word, should, but it carries a great weight of suffering. It should not be raining. He should not have said that. This should not be so hard. I should be further along by now. Each of these lays the world that is beside a world we imagined, and then suffers the distance between them. And the world that is does not bend to our should. It simply goes on being what it is. So the demand is never met, and the arrow, fired at reality itself, falls back always into our own hearts. Tonight we will look gently at this deepest of the second arrows, the quarrel with what is, and at the strange peace that comes when the quarrel is set down. Let us explore a story about this. In the hills, there was a gardener who kept an orchard of fruit trees, and he loved his trees as a parent loves children, and he watched over them through every season. He was a skilled gardener and a kind man, but he carried one heavy habit. He believed that the weather owed him a fair season, and so each year he waged a quiet war against the sky. When the spring came warm and early and the blossoms opened, he was glad, but anxiously so, already braced for what might spoil it. And one year a late frost came, as late frosts sometimes do, and settled over the orchard in the night, and in the morning many of the blossoms had blackened and fallen, and the harvest would be smaller for it. This was the first arrow the plain fact of the frost, a real loss to a man who loved his trees. But the gardener could not let it be a fact. He raged against it. It should not have frosted, he said. Not this year. Not after such a good spring. It is not fair. It is not right. He walked the orchard in a fury of grief, and he could not sleep, and for weeks he was bitter, comparing at every turn the fine harvest he had imagined with the smaller one the frost had left him. And the strange thing, the sad thing, was that in all his raging at the frost that was already gone, he barely tended the trees that had survived. His quarrel with the season he could not change cost him the care of the season he still had. Now an old woman lived at the edge of the orchard, who had grown fruit on those same hills for longer than he had been alive, and she found him one evening standing among the frost-struck trees, arguing with the sky. She listened to him for a while. Then she said, "You are asking the frost to not have come. It has come. It came in the night and it went, and it asked you nothing. The trees know this. Look at them. They are not arguing. The ones that were struck have let their blossoms fall, and the ones that were spared are already turning their leaves to the sun. Only you are still standing in a night that ended weeks ago. Only you are still standing in a night that ended weeks ago." The gardener looked at his trees then, truly looked, and saw that she was right. The trees had not protested the frost. They had simply met it, lost what was lost, and turned at once to the business of living with what remained. There was no quarrel in them. A tree does not lie awake insisting that the frost should not have come. It bends to the weather it is given, and grows in the direction of the light it has, and this is not defeat in a tree, it is life itself. Only the gardener, with his human should, had frozen himself in a night the trees had long since released. The old woman said one more thing before she left him in the dusk. "The frost is the first sorrow," she said. "Your quarrel with it is the second, and it is the one that has kept you cold all these weeks. Let the frost be what it was. Then go and tend the trees that are still standing." And he did. Not all at once, for the heart softened slowly, but he began to let the frost be a thing that had happened, rather than a thing that should not have. And as the quarrel left him, his sleep returned, and his hands returned to the living trees, and the smaller harvest, when it came, was sweet enough, and he was there to gather it. Let us stay with him a moment, because his quarrel is our quarrel, and it deserves tenderness. He did not rage at the frost out of foolishness. He raged because he loved his orchard, and because he carried, as nearly all of us carry, a deep, quiet picture of how things were supposed to go. And when the world stepped outside that picture, something in him refused. Not this. This is wrong. This should not be. And that refusal, however understandable, is a fist closed around a moment that will not change its shape to fit our grip. The frost had gone. Only the quarrel remained, and the quarrel was all his own. This is the arrow of should, and it hides inside nearly every other arrow we fire. The regret that reaches backward is a quarrel with a past that should have gone otherwise. The worry that reaches forward is a quarrel with a future that should turn out a certain way. The story the mind tells is so often a story about how things should be and are not. And underneath them all is this single tender refusal to let the moment be as it is, which is why the softening of this one arrow softens so much else. When we stop demanding that what is should be otherwise, the backward and the forward arrows begin on their own to lose their bows. And letting go of should is not the same as not caring. and it is not the same as approving. The gardener did not have to be glad of the frost. He did not have to call the loss good. He needed only to stop insisting it had not happened. To meet the frost as the trees met it. This came, this is what is. Now here is the light I still have. There is a great and quiet strength in that, the strength of a thing that bends to the weather and keeps growing. It is not surrender to defeat. It is the end of a war we were always going to lose, the war against the way things already are. You know this quarrel. You have lain awake insisting in 100 small ways that this should not be so, that the loss should not have come, that the person should have been different, that you should be somewhere other than where you are. And perhaps you can feel even now how much of the ache is not the thing itself but the arguing with the thing. The frost is the first sorrow, the quarrel is the second, and the quarrel is yours to set down. The quarrel with what is does not only rage at frost and sudden losses. Sometimes it argues with a slow change, a thing that shifts so gradually we never agree to it, and let us follow that quarrel to the water's edge. There was once a boatman whose family had kept a landing on a great river for generations, a wooden dock where boats tied up and travellers came and went. But rivers are living things, and over many years this one slowly changed its course, as great rivers do, its main channel drifting little by little away from the old landing, until the deep water ran a good way off, and the boatman's dock stood at the edge of a shallow, muddy backwater where no boat could easily come. Now there were two ways to meet this, and the boatman, for a long time, chose the first. He stood on his old dock and raged at the river. "This is where the landing has always been," he said. "This is where it belongs. The river has no right to leave me." And he insisted, year after year, that the water should return to its old bed, and he would not move his dock, because to move it felt like admitting the river had won. He grew bitter and poor, tied to a landing the boats had left, arguing each morning with a river that could not hear him and would not have changed its mind if it could. The river simply flowed where the land now led it, indifferent to his sense of how things ought to be. It was his own son, grown now, who at last said gently, "Father, the river has moved. It is not cruel. It is only a river, and rivers move. Let us build the dock where the water is." And though it broke something in the old man's pride to do it, they carried the timbers down to the river's new edge and built a landing there, in the deep water, where the boats now ran. And within a season, the travellers returned, and the family prospered again, and the old man, to his surprise, found that he was not defeated at all. He was simply a boatman on a living river once more, keeping his landing where the water was, rather than where the water had once been. Keeping his landing where the water is. There is a whole art of living in that small phrase. The river's moving was the first arrow, a real change, a real loss of the old and familiar. But the years of raging at it, the refusal to build where the water now ran, the insistence that the world return to the shape it used to have, that was the second arrow, and it cost him far more than the river ever did. For the river takes nothing from us by changing, it only changes. It is our demand that it stay as it was that strands us on a dock in the mud. And our lives are living rivers too. They move. The people in them change. The seasons of them change. The bodies and the circumstances and the shapes of our days all slowly shift their course, agreeing to nothing, asking no permission. and we can stand on the old landing and rage that things are not as they were, and grow bitter and stranded there. Or we can, in time, carry our timbers down to where the water actually runs now, and build our life at the river's true edge. Not the edge we wish were there, the one that is. This is what it means to stop quarreling with what is, to keep your landing where the water is, and to let the river be a river. There is something worth seeing about the word should, because it is so small and so heavy at once. Every time we say a thing should not be, we are holding two worlds in the mind at the same moment. There is the world as it actually is, the real one, the only one there is. And beside it, we hold up a second world, an imagined one, the world as we believe it ought to have been. And then we suffer endlessly the distance between them. But look at which of these two worlds is real. Only the first. The world as it is stands there solid and actual, asking nothing, simply being what it is. The world as it should be exists nowhere at all except inside our own insisting. It is a ghost, and we spend our nights grieving that the real world is not the ghost, demanding that what is solid give way to what is imaginary. And of course, it never does. And of course, we never win, because we are at war with a phantom of our own making. This is why the quarrel with what is can never end on its own terms. It is not a fight we might someday win if we push hard enough. It is a fight we lose freshly every moment, because reality will not become our imagination of it. Not tonight, not ever. The frost came, the river moved, the loss happened, the day was as it was, and no amount of insisting that it should have been otherwise will reach back and reshape a single grain of it. The only thing our should can change is us, and the only change it makes is to keep us cold and sleepless, standing in a night that ended long ago, arguing with a world that cannot hear us and would not alter if it could. And so the laying down of should is not a grim resignation. It is a homecoming. It is the moment we stop holding up the ghost world beside the real one and simply let the real one be real. Not because we approve of it, not because we call it good, only because it is what is, and it is the only world there is, and peace lives nowhere except inside it. The trees do not hold up a second, better spring beside the one the frost touched. They meet the spring they were given and turn toward the light they have. And in that meeting, there is no war, and so there is rest. You might tonight let the ghost world go. Whatever you have been insisting should be otherwise, the thing that happened, the way someone is, the place you find yourself in your life, you might, just for this one breath, stop holding up the imaginary version beside it. Let what is simply be what is. Unclench the hand that has been gripping the moment, trying to squeeze it into a different shape. Let the moment be its own shape. There is a strange and enormous relief in this. The relief of setting down a war you were always going to lose, and finding, underneath all that fighting, a world that was only ever asking to be allowed to be itself, and a night that was only ever waiting to hold you. And it is worth saying clearly, because the mind will object, that to accept what is not the same as to approve of it, and not the same as to give up. This is where we so often resist the letting go, fearing that if we stop insisting things should be otherwise, we are somehow consenting to them, or abandoning all hope of change. But it is the reverse. You can only ever move from where you actually are. A traveler who refuses to admit where he stands can never find his way home. He must first accept the real ground under his feet, however unwished for, before he can take a single true step from it. Acceptance is not the end of change. It is the ground that change must stand on. The gardener could only tend the trees that had survived once he stopped raging at the frost. So to accept what is tonight is not to say it is good, and not to say it must stay. It is only to stop fighting the ground you are standing on, so that you may rest upon it now and move from it, if moving is needed, when the morning comes. Let us rest here for a moment. If some part of you has been insisting tonight that things should be other than they are, you might let that insisting, just for now, grow soft. You do not have to like how things are. You do not have to call them good. Only, for this one breath, let them be as they are, the way the trees let the frost be the frost. There is nothing here to argue with tonight. Take a slow, deep breath and unclench the hand that has been gripping the moment, and let the moment simply be. When you are ready, we will go on together. There is one arrow left among the sharpest, and it is the one we aim most cruelly and least gently of all. It is not fired at the past, or the future, or the world. It is fired straight at ourselves, and to that arrow, and to the mercy that quiets it, we turn now. Of all the places we send the second arrow, the cruelest is inward. We fire it at ourselves. Something goes wrong, or we make a mistake, or a hard feeling arrives, and then a voice inside rises up and blames us for it. You should have known better. What is wrong with you? You always do this. It is a voice we would never use with someone we loved, and yet we turn it on ourselves in the dark without mercy, again and again. This arrow is especially heavy because it does not only hurt, it also convinces. It dresses itself as honesty, as taking responsibility, as the voice of someone who simply sees us clearly and is not fooled. And so we let it speak, and we believe it, and we lie awake being wounded by our own hand, mistaking the wounding for the truth. Tonight we will meet the inward arrow gently, and we will practice turning toward ourselves the same kindness we so easily give to others. Let us explore a story about this. In a mountain village, there lived an old grandmother who had raised many children and grandchildren, and who was known throughout the village for her gentleness with the young. When a child broke a bowl, she would say, "Bowls break. Come, let us clean it up." When a grandchild failed at some task and wept with shame, she would take their face in her hands and say, "You are learning. This is how learning looks." Her patience with the small ones seemed to have no bottom. The whole village sent their troubled children to sit with her, and they left calmer. But this same grandmother, who was so tender with every child, was merciless with herself. In the quiet of her own evenings, she would go over her long life and find in it only her failures. A harsh word she had spoken to her own mother 60 years before, a time she had been too tired to comfort a crying child. 100 small ways she felt she had fallen short across a life of caring for others, and she would lie in her bed and berate herself for all of it, calling herself hard names, firing into her own old heart the very arrows she would never ever have let fly at one of her grandchildren. The woman who told every child that bowls break could not forgive her own hands for the bowls they had broken long ago. One evening, her youngest granddaughter, a girl of perhaps 7, could not sleep, and she padded into her grandmother's room and found the old woman awake and troubled in the dark. "What is wrong, grandmother?" the child asked. And the old woman, too tired to hide it, said, I am thinking of all the things I did wrong in my life." The child was quiet for a moment, in the way that children sometimes are when they see something the grown-ups have missed. Then she said, "But grandmother, when I do something wrong, you always say I am learning, and you hold my face, and you are kind. Why are you not kind to you? Why are you not kind to you?" The old grandmother had no answer. She had spent a whole long life offering mercy to every heart but her own, and it had never once occurred to her that she might turn that same mercy inward, that the kindness she believed in so completely for the young might also somehow be meant for her. She took the child back to bed, and she lay awake again, but differently now. And she began, for the first time in her long life, to speak to her own old self as she would have spoken to a grieving child. "You were tired," she said gently to the memory of the harsh word. "You were young. You were learning. This is how learning looks." She held her own face in her mind, the way she had held so many small faces, and something in her, hard and cold for 60 years, began at last to thaw. Let us stay with her a moment, because her cruelty to herself was not real wisdom, though it wore wisdom's clothes. She believed that her harshness was honesty, that to forgive herself would be to excuse herself, to let herself off from what she had done. But look at how she treated the children. She did not lie to them. She did not pretend their mistakes had not happened. She simply met their mistakes with warmth instead of scorn, with "Come, let us clean it up," instead of "What is wrong with you?" And the children grew, not worse for the kindness, but better, steadier, braver. Her mercy did not spoil them, it healed them, and the only heart she had ever refused that mercy was her own. This is the inward arrow, and it may be the one that most needs our gentleness tonight, because it is so practiced, so quick, so sure that it is right. When something goes wrong, the inner voice does not pause to ask whether blame is fair or kind or useful. It simply fires. "You should have. What is wrong with you?" And we believe it, because it sounds like the truth, and because a part of us fears that if we stop blaming ourselves, we would stop trying, would become careless, would fall apart. But the grandmother's grandchildren show us otherwise. It is not scorn that helps a heart grow. It is mercy. The child held with warmth after a mistake does not become careless. They become able to try again. And so the softening of the inward arrow is not a lowering of your standards, and it is not pretending you have never done harm. It is the radical, simple act of turning toward yourself the same kindness you would offer without a second thought to a frightened child or a grieving friend. It is speaking to your own tired heart in the voice you would use for someone you love. You were doing your best with what you knew. You were tired. You were afraid. This is how being human looks. It is holding your own face in the dark with a warm hand. You know the inward arrow. You have lain awake while a voice inside recited your failures, went over your mistakes, told you what was wrong with you in words you would be ashamed to say aloud to anyone else. And perhaps, hearing the grandmother's story, you can feel how strange it is, how upside down, that the mercy you would give so freely to another is the one thing you withhold from yourself. Why are you not kind to you? There is no good answer to the child's question. There is only perhaps the beginning of a different way. Tonight you might let the harsh voice rest and speak to yourself instead as you would to someone you love. There is a simple way to feel how strange the inward arrow is, and it lies in imagining the very same trouble happening to someone we love. Let us follow that a moment. There were once two brothers who worked side by side as scribes, copying letters and records with pen and ink. Careful work where a single slip stroke could spoil a whole page. And it happened one day that each brother, tired in the late afternoon, made the same mistake. A blot of ink fell upon a page near the end of a long day's copying, ruining the work. The younger brother, seeing the elder's blotted page, was all kindness at once. "It is nothing," he said. "You have copied 20 pages today. Anyone's hand grows tired by the last. Rest your eyes, have some tea, and begin the page fresh in the morning. It happens to us all." And the elder brother was comforted and set the page aside without shame and slept easily that night. But when the younger brother looked at his own blotted page, no such kindness came. Instead, a hard voice rose in him at once. "Careless," it said, "stupid. You have wasted the whole page and the whole afternoon. What kind of scribe cannot hold his hand steady to the end of a day?" He sat late into the night berating himself, going over the blot again and again, and he slept poorly and rose the next morning already tired and small, so that his hand, still trembling from the night's self-scolding, was more likely to slip again, not less. Two brothers, the very same blot, the very same tired hand at the end of the very same long day. And to the one he loved, the younger brother gave mercy, and the mercy healed. To himself he gave scorn, and the scorn only wounded, and made the next mistake more likely, not less. Nothing in the blots was different. Everything in the meeting of them was. And if you had asked him why he was so gentle with his brother and so cruel to himself, he would have had no good answer, for there is none. The steady hand of the morning does not come from the lash. It comes from rest, and rest comes from mercy. This is the quiet test we might carry into the dark. When the inward arrow rises and begins to recite your faults, you might ask softly, "Would I say this to my brother? Would I say it to my dearest friend, to a tired child, to anyone I loved who had simply made a human mistake at the end of a long human day?" And if the answer is no, as it almost always is, then you might wonder why you say it to yourself, and whether the voice that speaks so harshly is really the voice of truth at all, or only an old habit that has never once helped you copy a cleaner page. You may give yourself the younger brother's kindness. It is nothing. You are tired. Rest and begin fresh in the morning. It happens to us all. It is worth asking gently where that harsh inner voice even came from, because almost no one is born speaking to themselves so cruelly. Listen to it closely sometime, the voice that recites your faults in the dark, and you may find that it is not really your own voice at all. It is an old voice, borrowed long ago. Perhaps it is the voice of someone who was hard on you when you were small, a parent worn thin, a teacher who scolded, someone whose sharpness you took inside yourself and have been repeating ever since, long after they are gone. We are not born knowing how to fire the inward arrow. We learn it, usually young, from someone who fired it at us, and then we keep firing it at ourselves for the rest of our lives, mistaking an old inherited harshness for the simple truth about who we are. And once you see that the cruel voice is borrowed, something loosens, because a voice you learned is a voice you can, slowly, unlearn. You are not obliged to keep speaking to yourself in the hard words of someone who did not know better. You can choose, instead, the voice you would use for someone you love. Not a false voice, not a flatterer's voice that pretends you never err, simply a kind one, the voice the grandmother finally found for her own old heart, the voice the younger brother gave so freely to the elder. You were tired. You were doing your best with what you knew. This is how being human looks. You are still learning, as everyone is, until the very end. For here is what the harsh voice never understands. Cruelty does not make us better. It never has. The child spoken to with scorn does not grow steadier. They grow frightened and smaller and more likely to stumble. And the same is true of the child you still carry inside you. Blaming yourself in the dark does not make you wiser or kinder or more careful tomorrow. It only wounds the very one who has to get up and try again in the morning. It is mercy, not scorn, that lets a heart grow. It is warmth, not the lash, that steadies the trembling hand. So tonight, when the borrowed voice begins its recitation, you might gently set it down, the way you would take away a whip from someone about to strike a child, not with anger at the voice, for it is only an old habit doing what it learned, only with a quiet, firm kindness. Not tonight, you might say to it, not to this heart. This heart has carried enough. And in its place, you might offer yourself the thing you have always been so ready to offer others and so slow to offer yourself: gentleness. Lay a warm hand in your mind over your own tired heart. Speak to yourself as you would to a weeping child, or a dear friend, or anyone at all that you loved. You are enough. You did your best. You are worthy of your own kindness tonight and every night, exactly as you are. Notice too, the strange and impossible standard the inward arrow holds you to. It does not measure you against real living people who stumble and forget and fall short 100 times a day, as everyone does. It measures you against a perfect version of yourself that has never existed and never could. A self who would have known better, done better, never faltered, never been tired or afraid or simply human. And then it blames you endlessly for not being that impossible person. But no one is that person. Look at anyone you love, truly love, and you will see that you do not ask perfection of them. You love them with their flaws, their bad days, their mistakes. Indeed, the flaws are half of what makes them dear to you. You would never hold them to the merciless standard you hold yourself to. You would think it cruel to try. So why the impossible standard for yourself alone? There is no good reason, only the old habit again, the borrowed harshness that never once made anyone better. You might, tonight, let that impossible self go, the flawless one you have been failing to be all your life. You do not have to be perfect to deserve your own kindness. You have only to be human, tired and trying, as you are, as everyone is. That is enough. It has always been enough. The real you, the flawed and human and doing your best you, is far more worthy of love than the perfect ghost you have been punishing yourself for not becoming. So tonight, you might lay that impossible standard down gently beside the bow and the bundle of arrows and let it rest there in the dark with all the other weights you have carried too long. You are allowed to be a human being tonight and nothing more, and that is a soft and forgiving thing to be. Let us rest here for a moment. If a voice inside has been blaming you tonight, reciting your faults, firing arrow after arrow into your own heart, you might let it, just for now, grow quiet, and in its place, you might offer yourself a single kind sentence, the kind you would offer a weeping child. You are doing your best. You are learning. This is how being human looks. Take a slow, deep breath and hold your own tired heart gently, the way the grandmother learned at last to hold hers. There is no one here who needs to be blamed tonight. When you are ready, we will go on together. We have now met the arrows one by one. The arrow of resistance and of the story, and the arrows aimed backward and forward, and the deep quarrel with what is, and the cruel one aimed at ourselves. And a question may be forming softly. It is good to see the arrows, but how does one actually stop firing them? That is where we turn next, to the quiet space between the first arrow and the second, and the noticing that lives there. We have seen the arrows now, one by one, and a gentle question rises. It is one thing to know that we fire a second arrow. It is another to stop. So how does one stop? The answer is quieter and simpler than we expect, and it lives in a small space that most of us have never noticed. It is the space between the first arrow and the second, the pause, the gap, between the moment something touches us and the moment we react to it. There is always a small opening. It may be no wider than a single breath. In that opening, before the mind has drawn its bow, there is a stillness, and in that stillness lives all our freedom. For the second arrow can only be fired from a mind that has not noticed. It is reaching for the bow. And the whole of the practice, if we can call something so gentle a practice, is simply to notice, to see the arrow before it flies. Tonight we will rest in that small space and learn the soft art of watching the arrow rise before we let it go. Let us explore a story about this. At the gate of an old walled town, there worked a gatekeeper, and his task was to watch who came and went. In his younger years, he had been quick and anxious, and whenever a traveller approached the gate, he would leap up at once, challenge them, question them, decide in an instant whether they were friend or threat, and often he decided wrongly, turning away honest merchants and waving through those he should have watched. He acted so fast that he never truly saw who stood before him. He met each arrival with a reaction already loaded and fired it before he had looked. As the years passed, the gatekeeper grew wiser, and he learned a small thing that changed his work entirely. He learned to wait one breath. When a traveller appeared on the road, he no longer leapt up at once. He sat still, and he watched them come, and he let himself simply see them. The dust on their cloak, the look on their face, the load they carried, before he decided anything at all. In that one breath of watching, everything became clear that his old haste had missed. He saw which travellers were weary and meant no harm, and which needed a closer eye. His judgments grew calm and true, not because he tried harder, but because he had made a small space in which to see before he acted. Now a young man came to train under him, eager and quick as the gatekeeper himself had once been, forever leaping up, forever reacting. And the old gatekeeper taught him only one thing over and over. When someone approaches, he said, "Do not move yet. Breathe once. Watch them come. You have time. You always have more time than your fear tells you. The gate is not in danger from a single breath." And the young man, slowly, learned to wait and learned to see, and became in time a fine keeper of the gate. Let us stay with that one breath, because it is everything. The traveller on the road is the first arrow, whatever life sends toward us, the harsh word, the setback, the wave of feeling. And the leaping up, the instant reaction, the challenge fired before we have even looked, that is the second arrow. And between them lies the gatekeeper's single breath, the small space in which we might simply see what has arrived before we load our response to it. That space is always there. It is there right now, between any feeling and our reaction to it. We have only never been taught to rest in it. We have spent our lives leaping up. This is what the gentle traditions mean by mindfulness, though the word can sound grander than the thing it names. It is not a special state, and it is not emptying the mind, and it is not something only monks can do on mountaintops. It is simply the gatekeeper's breath. It is the small pause in which you notice, oh, a hard feeling has arrived, before you begin to fight it, or explain it, or blame yourself for it. In that noticing, you are no longer the one firing the arrow. You have become the one watching the arrow rise, and an arrow that is watched gently, without struggle, very often simply falls back to the ground unfired. For here is the quiet wonder of it. You do not have to stop the second arrow by force. Forcing would only be another arrow, another leaping up. You have only to see it clearly, to watch the mind reach for the bow with the same calm attention the gatekeeper gave the road. And in the light of that seeing, the reaching loses its grip. The story you are about to tell yourself, seen as a story rising, does not need to be argued with. It simply thins. The blame about to be fired, noticed as it lifts, does not need to be fought. It softens on its own. Seeing is enough. The watched arrow rarely flies, and notice how much of our night is spent leaping up. A feeling arrives and we are instantly upon it, fighting or fleeing or explaining, never once pausing to simply see it standing there on the road. But you have time. You always have more time than your fear tells you. Between this feeling and your reaction to it, there is a breath, and in that breath, there is room to watch instead of leap. That is the whole of it. Not a struggle, not a technique to master, only the gatekeeper's patience. Breathe once and watch what has come before you move. There's another old image for this small space, and it may help you feel it even more gently, for it is made of sound. In a temple among the hills, there hung a great bronze bell, and each evening a monk would strike it once, and the deep sound would roll out across the valley. And a young novice was given, as his practice, simply to listen to the bell, not to do anything, only to strike it once and then listen all the way, until the sound had faded completely into silence. At first, the novice found this almost unbearable. He would strike the bell, and the moment the sound began, his mind would leap. He would think about the sound, judge it, wonder if he had struck it well, begin already to reach for the next strike, plan the rest of his evening. He was never really with the bell at all. He struck it and immediately left it, off into his thoughts, so that the sound rang out unheard while he was busy elsewhere in his mind. And the old teacher watched and said only, "You are striking the next bell before this one has finished. Let this one ring, let this one ring." So the novice practiced over many evenings the hardest and simplest thing, to strike the bell once and then to do nothing at all but listen, to let the sound arise and swell and slowly, slowly thin into silence, without reaching for anything, without adding anything, without leaping ahead. And he found in time that a whole world lived in that listening. The sound arose on its own. It faded on its own. He did not have to do anything to it. He had only to be there still and let it ring and let it go. This is the second arrow and the space before it, told in sound. A feeling arises in us like the struck bell, and our habit is to leap at once, to judge it, fight it, explain it, reach for the next thing, so that we are never really with the feeling at all, only busy in our reactions to it. But a feeling, like the bell's sound, arises on its own, and if we let it, fades on its own. It does not need us to do anything to it. It needs only to be allowed to ring and to be heard all the way until it thins into silence of its own accord. The leaping is the second arrow. The listening is the freedom. Let this feeling ring, and it will fade, as every struck bell fades into a quiet that was always waiting underneath it. There is an old image that makes this space easy to feel, and it is the widest and most restful image of all. Think of the sky. All day and all night, weather moves across the sky. Clouds gather and drift and darken and clear. Storms roll through and pass. Sometimes the whole sky is grey from edge to edge, and it seems from within it that the grey is everything, that it will never lift. And yet the sky itself is never harmed by any of it. The sky does not become the storm. The clouds move across it and move on, and the sky remains vast and open and untouched, holding the weather without being the weather, always there behind it, wider than anything that passes through. You are far more like the sky than like the weather. The thoughts and feelings that move through you, even the darkest, even the ones that seem, from inside them, to be everything, are weather. They gather and they darken and they pass. And there is something in you that watches them come and go, something that was here before this feeling arrived and will still be here after it has moved on. Something wide and quiet and untouched that holds all your weather without being harmed by any of it. This watching stillness is what you most deeply are, not the passing storm, but the sky that holds it, not the anxious thought, but the quiet awareness in which the thought appears and dissolves. And this is the whole secret of the small space before the second arrow. When a hard feeling comes and you leap to fight it, you have mistaken yourself for the weather. You have become the storm thrashing inside it. But when you pause and watch and let the feeling be seen, you remember that you are the sky. You are the one watching the cloud, not the cloud. And a feeling that is watched from that wide, quiet place has room to simply move through and move on, the way a cloud crosses an open sky, needing nothing from you, harming nothing in you, passing of its own accord. So tonight, you do not have to do anything at all with what passes through you. You do not have to fix it or fight it or chase it away. You have only to be the sky. Let the thought arise and watch it, and let it drift on. Let the feeling come and hold it the way the sky holds a cloud, loosely, openly, without grasping and without pushing away, and let it pass. There is so much room in you, more room than you have ever known. The wide, dark, quiet room of the sky at night, and everything that moves through it is only weather, and all of it is passing, and none of it is you. Rest as the sky rests. Hold your weather gently, and let it all drift on toward morning while the vast, still sky of you simply, quietly remains. There is one more small thing that opens this space, and it is so simple it hardly seems like a practice at all. It is naming. When a feeling arrives in the night, we are usually swept into it before we know what has happened, carried off inside it, become it. But if, in the small space of a breath, you can quietly name what has come, something shifts. This is worry, you might say to yourself, gently, the way you would name a bird that landed on the sill. This is sadness. This is the old ache. Ah, here is fear. You are not fighting it by naming it, and you are not feeding it. You are only seeing it, and saying softly what it is. And in that naming, a small distance opens, the gatekeeper's distance, the width of one breath. And in that distance, you are no longer only the feeling. You are also the one who sees it and can name it. This is worry, and I am the one who notices the worry. The two are not the same, and the noticing is always calmer than the thing it notices. Try it, softly, with whatever is here now. Do not reach for it or push it away. Only name it, once, kindly, and let it be named. And then notice the one who named it, the quiet watcher, calm and unhurried, who has been here all along beneath every passing feeling. That watcher does not need to sleep by any effort. It is already at rest. It has never fired an arrow in its life. It only watches, the way the night sky watches its own weather, the way the still surface of a pond receives the moon without reaching for it. You may rest there tonight as that quiet watcher and let every feeling that comes be seen and named and allowed to pass across the wide calm space of you like a slow cloud across the stars. And this small space, this gap before the second arrow, is not only for the great pains of the night. You can find it anywhere in the smallest moments of the day, and each time you rest in it, you make it a little easier to find again. The gatekeeper's breath is there in the tiny irritations, the dropped cup, the slow line, the word that stings. In each of these, there is the same small opening between what happens and how we answer it, and you can practice pausing in it, gently, 100 times a day, until the pausing becomes a quiet habit, a way of meeting life rather than a thing you must remember to do. For this is how the practice grows, not by great effort on great occasions, but by small, soft returns to the gap, again and again, until watching becomes as natural as leaping once was. You are not trying to become a different person. You are only befriending the small space that was always there, learning to rest in it a breath longer each time, until one day you notice that the arrows fly less often on their own, not because you fought them, but because you have spent so many quiet moments simply watching them rise that watching has become your first response instead of your last. Tonight is one of those moments. Right now, in this pause, you are already doing the practice. There is nothing more to it than this. Each quiet breath in which you simply watch and do not leap is the whole teaching, complete in itself. There is no further along to get to. This gentle noticing right now is not the road to the peace. It is the peace already here, already yours, in this small watched breath and the next. Let us rest here for a moment. Right now, whatever is passing through you, some feeling, some thought, some old ache, you might simply watch it, the way the gatekeeper watched the road. Do not leap up to fight it or fix it. Only see it there and breathe and let it be watched. Notice that you are the one watching, calm and still at the gate, and not the feeling itself. There is nothing to challenge tonight and no arrow to fire. Take a slow, deep breath and rest in the small, quiet space where all your freedom lives. When you are ready, we will go on together. To watch the arrow rise is the beginning, but there is a step gentler still, a way of meeting each feeling not merely by seeing it, but by welcoming it, by laying the bow down entirely and letting what comes simply come. To that final softening, we now turn. We come now to the softest teaching of all, and in a way the whole of it. We have learned to see the second arrow rising. Now we learn simply to lay the bow down, not to fight the arrow, not even to watch it warily, but to set aside the very readiness to fire and to meet whatever comes with an open hand instead of a drawn string. For beneath all our arrows lies a stance, a leaning forward, a bracing, a readiness to resist whatever the next moment brings. And the deepest ease comes not from firing our arrows more skillfully, nor even from watching them more closely, but from setting the bow down in the grass and letting our hands be empty, from meeting the moment as it is, with nothing loaded, nothing drawn. Tonight we will practice the gentle art of allowing, of laying the bow down, of letting each feeling be a guest we welcome rather than an enemy we meet armed. Let us explore a story about this. In a quiet province, there lived a master of the bow, famous through the region, whose students came from far away to learn the art of archery from him, and they expected him to teach them ever greater feats, to strike smaller targets from further off, to draw stronger and aim truer. But the old master taught something they did not expect, and some of them grew impatient with him for it. One young student, the most gifted and the most restless, drew his bow one day before the master and struck the center of a distant target and turned, pleased to be praised. The old master nodded and said only, "Now put it down." The young man was confused. He drew again and struck the center again, more finely still. "Put it down," the master said again. Finally, the young man, frustrated, asked what the master meant, and the old master said, "You know how to draw the bow. Anyone with enough years can learn that. What you do not yet know is how to lower it. You walk through your whole life with the string drawn, ready to loose an arrow at everything that comes. Learn to walk with the bow down and your hands open, and you will have learned something the target could never teach you. Learn to walk with the bow down." The young man did not understand at first, for he was young, and his hands had grown so used to the draw that an unloaded bow felt to him like defenselessness. But over the seasons, watching the old master move through his days, he began to see it. The master met everything with open hands. When a student failed, he did not tense to correct. He simply received the failure calm and unarmed, and then, from that ease, offered what was needed. When bad news came, he did not brace against it. He let it arrive, felt it fully, and did not add to it. When praise came, he did not clutch at it. He walked through his life with the bow down, and nothing that came at him found a drawn string to catch it. The arrows of the world still touched him, for they touch everyone. But he fired none of his own in return, and so he was, in the deepest sense, at peace. Let us stay with this, because it is the gentlest and the strongest thing in all our teaching tonight. To lay the bow down is not to become weak, and it is not to stop caring, and it is not to let the world walk over you. The old master was not defenseless, he was free. To lay the bow down is simply to stop meeting each moment already braced to resist it. It is to let the sadness be sad without arming yourself against it. To let the uncertainty be uncertain without drawing back your string. To let the night be the night and the feeling be the feeling, and to keep your hands open and empty so that whatever comes may come and pass and go, finding in you nothing to catch it and hold it fast. And this is the quiet answer to how one stops firing the second arrow. Not by vigilance alone, not by forever watching for arrows and wrestling them down, for that is its own kind of drawn bow, its own subtle tension, but by a deeper softening, a laying down of the readiness itself, by meeting your own feelings the way you would welcome a tired guest to your door. Come in, sit, Stay as long as you need. I will not fight you. The grief, welcomed, does its slow work and departs. The fear, met with an open hand, moves through and is gone. It is our arming against them, our drawn and ready string, that holds them in place and makes them stay. Lay the bow down, and they pass through, as all things pass. You have carried the drawn bow. You know the feeling of moving through your days and nights already braced, already resisting, ready to fight whatever the next hour brings. And perhaps you can feel, even now, how tiring that readiness is, how it lives in the shoulders and the jaw and the held breath. Tonight you might lay it down, not to become careless, but to become free, to let your hands be open on the covers, to let the next feeling, whatever it is, simply arrive and be met with ease rather than a drawn string. You have more safety in the open hand than you ever had in the fist. The bow can rest in the grass. You need not carry it into sleep. There is a warmer way to picture this laying down of the bow, warmer than any archer's field, and let us rest with it before the close. Imagine an innkeeper who keeps a house beside a well-travelled road, and whose way it is to welcome every traveller who comes to the door, not only the pleasant ones, every one. On a given night, joy might arrive, bright and laughing, and the innkeeper welcomes it in, gives it a seat by the fire, and lets it stay as long as it will. But on another night, it is sorrow who knocks, travel-worn and heavy, and the innkeeper opens the door just as wide. "Come in," he says. "Sit by the fire. I will not turn you away." And on another night it is fear at the door, or anger, or grief, and to each the innkeeper says the same. "Come in, sit, stay as long as you need. I will not fight you at the threshold." Now a guest at the inn once asked him, "Does it not exhaust you to welcome even the dark ones, the sorrow and the fear? Would it not be better to bar the door against them?" And the innkeeper smiled and said, "I tried that once when I was young. I stood at the door and fought to keep the unwelcome ones out. And do you know what happened? They gathered on the step and pounded all night, and I got no rest for the guarding, and in the end they came in anyway, for they always do. Now I open the door, I let them in, I let them sit by the fire. And here is the secret," he said. "When I welcome them, they stay only a while and warm themselves, and then in their own time, they rise and go on down the road. It is the barring of the door that keeps them pounding. It is the welcome that lets them leave. It is the welcome that lets them leave. There is the whole of laying down the bow told at a doorway. The feelings we most want to bar out, the sorrow, the fear, the ache, do not leave faster for our fighting them. They gather on the step and pound all the harder and steal our rest with the guarding, and come in at last regardless, for they always do. It is only when we open the door, when we let them come in and sit by the fire and be felt all the way, that they warm themselves and, in their own good time, rise and go on. What we welcome can move through us and leave. What we bar against stays pounding at the door all night, so you need not stand guard tonight. You need not brace at the threshold of your own heart, ready to fight off whatever feeling might come. You might instead be the innkeeper. Let the door stand open. Whatever arrives, joy or sorrow, ease or ache, you might simply welcome it in and give it a seat by the fire, and trust that, met with that open-handed welcome, it will warm itself a while and then rise and go on down the road. The bow can rest. The door can stand open. There is nothing here you need to fight off tonight. This laying down of the bow is not one grand act, done once and finished. It is 1,000 small releasings, and the body is where you practice them. For the drawn bow is not only a stance of the mind, it is held in the flesh, in 100 small tensions we have carried so long, we no longer feel them as holding. And so, the softening can begin, tonight, quite simply, with the body, letting each held place lay its own small bow down, one by one, until the whole of you is at rest. Begin at the top, and let your attention move down slowly, like warm water. Let the scalp soften, and the small muscles of the forehead, which hold so much of our worrying. Let the space between the eyebrows, where we furrow against the world, grow smooth and wide. Let the eyes rest heavy in their sockets, no longer needing to look or search. Let the cheeks soften and the hinge of the jaw release, that great clencher of the second arrow, until the teeth part slightly and the tongue rests easy in the mouth. Feel how much holding lived in the face and how good it is to set it down. Let the softening move down into the throat and the neck and the shoulders, those faithful carriers that have crept up toward the ears under the weight of the day. Let them drop down and back into the bed. Let the arms grow heavy, the elbows, the wrists, and the hands, those hands that have gripped so much. Let them fall open, the fingers uncurling, the palms soft and empty and turned up toward rest. Let the chest, which braces around our fears, grow soft so the breath can move freely again, low and slow. Let the belly, which we hold tight against the world, release and rise and fall on its own. Let the back, the hips, the long muscles of the legs, the knees, the ankles, the very soles of the feet, let all of it soften and grow heavy and sink into the support beneath you. And as the body lays its bow down, place by place, notice that the mind grows quiet along with it, for the two are not truly separate. A body that has stopped bracing does not know how to keep worrying. The alarm has no muscle left to sound. So let the whole of you, flesh and thought together, come to rest. There is nothing to be armed against tonight. There is no bow that needs holding, no string that needs drawing, no readiness you must keep. You are safe here, in this bed, in this dark, in this breath. You may lay every bow down in the grass, every one, and rest at last with your hands open and empty and your whole body at peace. And there is a deep trust hidden inside the open hand, which is perhaps the last thing worth saying before we come to the close. The clenched fist believes it must hold everything together, that if it ever let go, all would be lost, that only its constant gripping keeps the world from falling apart. It is a tiring belief, and it is not true. The open hand knows something the fist has forgotten, that most of what we grip so desperately was never being held up by our gripping at all. The breath breathes itself. The heart beats without our command. The night turns towards morning whether we hold it or not. The garden grows while we sleep. So very much of life carries on, quietly and well, entirely without our clenched and anxious holding, and would carry on just the same if we let the hand fall open. To lay the bow down, then, is finally an act of trust. It is trusting that you may stop holding yourself together for a few hours, and you will not fall apart, that you may stop guarding, and no disaster will rush the unguarded gate, that you may let go of the day, and the day will keep, and the world will still be here in the morning, and you along with it, more rested for having loosed your grip. The open hand is not the hand of someone who has given up. It is the hand of someone who has, at last, let themselves be held by the bed, by the night, by the slow, patient turning of things that has always carried them and asks only to be trusted. Let your hands fall open on the covers, palms soft, and feel underneath all you're holding how much has been holding you all along. There is one last image for this deep trust, and it is the gentlest of all, and perhaps you knew it once yourself, long ago. Think of a small child who has fallen asleep in the arms of someone who loves them. The child is not holding on. That is the whole beauty of it. The child has let go completely, gone soft and heavy and utterly at ease, trusting entirely that they are held, that they need do nothing at all to keep from falling, that the arms will not let them go. The child does not brace. The child does not keep watch. The child simply rests, wholly given over, because they trust they are safe. You may rest that way tonight. You are held too, though you have perhaps forgotten it. Held by the bed beneath you, by the night around you, by the slow, patient turning of the world that has carried you safely through every day of your life and will carry you through this one. You do not have to hold yourself together. You do not have to keep the watch. You may go soft and heavy in the arms of the dark, like a child who has finally stopped fighting sleep and trust that you are held and let go all the way into rest. There is nothing you must do to keep from falling. You are already and always have been carried. You were carried as an infant before you could hold up your own head, and something has gone on carrying you every night of your life since, through every sleep you have ever fallen into and risen from. Tonight is no different. You may let go into the same faithful holding that has never once let you fall, and rest as you rested long ago before you ever learned to hold yourself so tightly. Let us rest here for a moment. Feel, if you can, the places where you have been holding the bow drawn, the shoulders, the chest, the held breath, the readiness, and let them, one by one, soften and set the bow down. There is nothing to be armed against tonight. Whatever comes, you may meet it with an open hand. Let your hands be open. Let your breath be easy. Let the readiness itself dissolve into the dark. Take a slow, deep breath and lay the bow down in the grass and rest with your hands empty and at peace. When you are ready, we will come gently to the close. We come now to the last of our quiet hours together and to the gentlest truth of all. It is this, that the first arrow, the honest wound of simply being alive, heals on its own, in time, if only we will stop firing the second. The wound heals in the open air. It is our returning to it, our poking and binding and reopening, that keeps it raw. Left alone, met with an open hand, even deep hurts close slowly of their own accord. The way the body knits a cut when we stop worrying it, the way still water clears when we stop stirring the silt. Let us explore one last story, softly, for the night is late. There was a monk who tended a small garden beside his hut, and one spring he fell ill and could not tend it for many weeks. He lay in his bed and grieved for the garden, certain it was being lost, and part of his grief was a second arrow, a fretting over the ruin he imagined. But he was too weak to rise, and so, for once in his life, he could do nothing but let the garden be. And when at last he was well enough to walk out into it, he found that it had not been ruined at all. It had grown wild, yes, in its own way, but the rains had watered it, and the sun had warmed it, and things he had never planted had bloomed in the corners, and the earth had gone on being the earth, quietly, without him. He had suffered for weeks over a ruin that never came, and the garden, left alone, had simply lived. It had healed in the open air, needing far less from his anxious hands than he had ever believed. And that is the last and quietest teaching of the second arrow. So much in us heals if we will only stop wounding it further. The sorrow, left to be sorrow, softens. The tired mind, no longer fought, grows still. The heart, met with mercy instead of blame, mends slowly in the open air of simply being allowed to be. You do not have to heal yourself tonight by force. You have only to stop firing the second arrow and let the deep, patient healing that lives in all living things do its slow and certain work, the way the garden grew while the monk simply rested. There is one last image to rest in before we gather everything up, and it is the stillest of all. Think of a pool of clear water into which a handful of silt has been stirred, so that the whole pool is clouded and dark and you cannot see the bottom. This is the mind on a troubled night, stirred and murky, unable to see clearly through all that has been churned up in it. And what does a wise person do to clear such a pool? Nothing. That is the secret. There is nothing to do. You cannot clear muddy water by reaching in and stirring it further. Every effort to grab the silt and force it down only clouds the water more. You can only set the pool down and leave it alone and let it be still. And as it rests untouched, the silt settles of its own weight, slowly, quietly, to the bottom, and the water grows clear again all by itself, until you can see straight through to the smooth stones below. The mind is such a pool. It clears not by effort but by rest. Every arrow we fire in the night is another hand stirring the silt, another reaching in to churn the water we are trying to see through. And the teaching of this whole quiet evening comes down in the end to this: set the pool down, stop stirring, let the mind be still, and trust that the murk will settle on its own, as it always does, and the clear water return, not because you forced it, but because you finally let it rest. You do not have to clear your own mind tonight by any effort at all. You have only to stop stirring and let the silt of the day drift slowly down and let the water still. Before we gather everything up, let us take a long, slow while simply to rest, for the teaching is finished now and there is nothing left to learn tonight, only this soft settling into sleep. You have walked a long way through these hours, through the 2 arrows and the resistance, through the stories and the reaching backward and forward, through the quarrel with what is and the arrow turned inward, through the small space of watching and the laying down of the bow. It is enough. You do not have to hold any of it. You have only to rest now and let it settle into you the way rain settles into the earth, quietly, in its own time, doing its slow good work long after the night is over. So let the whole weight of you grow heavy and soft. Feel the places where your body meets the bed, the back of the head, the shoulders, the length of the spine, the backs of the legs, the heels, and let each of those places give its weight fully over to what holds it, so that you are carried entirely and hold yourself up nowhere at all. Let the face soften, the brow, the eyes, the jaw. Let the hands lie open, and let the breath move slowly, all on its own, low and easy, each breath out carrying a little more of the day away into the dark. And as you rest, you might let a few soft wishes move through you, the oldest kind of kindness, offered first to yourself, here, tonight. May I be at ease. May I be gentle with myself. May I rest. And then, if you like, let those same wishes widen outward to the ones you love, sleeping or waking somewhere in the same night. May they be at ease. May they be gentle with themselves. May they rest. And wider still, to all the countless others lying awake tonight as you have lain awake, all the tired hearts firing their own second arrows in their own dark rooms, all of them longing as you long for peace. May they be at ease. May they lay their arrows down. May they and you and all of us rest. There is a great quiet comfort in this widening, in remembering that you are not alone in the night, that your struggle is the old human struggle, shared by everyone who has ever tried to sleep with a heavy heart, and that the same gentleness you are learning to offer yourself is being sought this very moment by more hearts than you could ever count. Let those wishes fade now softly like a bell's sound, thinning into silence, and let even them go. There is nothing left to do, not even to wish, only to rest, only to breathe, only to let the night hold you as it has always held you. So let us gather now all that we have walked through in these quiet hours, and then let it go, and let ourselves go with it, down into sleep. We began with a woman stung by a bee, and an old man who had learned to let the bee sting once and add nothing of his own. We floated with a young swimmer who stopped fighting the current and let it carry him gently to shore. We sat in the shade with a merchant who did not turn a broken wheel into a broken life. We watched a potter carry her cracked bowl out from under its shelf of judgment and let it fill, at last, with rain. We stood in an orchard where the trees did not argue with the frost and learned that only we lie awake in nights that ended long ago. We heard a child ask her grandmother, "Why are you not kind to you?" We waited one breath at the gate before we leapt, and we learned from an old master simply to lay the bow down and walk with open hands. And there were the quieter travelers too, the ones we met along the way, and they are worth gathering in as well before we let them go. There was a weaver who let a stranger's careless word grow into a heavy cloth she wore all day, and learned she could unravel it again. There was a traveller who stopped hunching against the rain and walked home easy in the very same weather. There was a student who wove a whole forest of failure from a teacher's frown. There was only a pain in an old man's side. There was a man grieving a road he never walked, measuring his true life against a dream. There was a mother who buried her son 12 times in the dark while he walked home safe beneath the stars. There was a boatman who learned to build his landing where the water is, and 2 brothers who made the same small blot, one meeting it with mercy and one with scorn. There was a bell struck once and allowed to ring all the way into silence. There was an innkeeper who welcomed every guest, even sorrow, and found that what is welcomed always leaves by morning. And there was a still pool that cleared itself, all on its own, the moment the stirring stopped. So many quiet lives, and all of them saying in their different ways the same soft thing. The first arrow comes, and we cannot always help it. The second is ours, and we may, a little more each night, gently cease to fire it. That is the whole of what we have walked through in these hours, and you may carry all of it with you, or none of it, into sleep. You do not need to remember any of it. If one image stays with you, one story, one soft phrase, let that be enough, and let it do its quiet work in its own time. And if nothing stays, that is well too. The teachings will settle where they settle. The bee stings once. The rest we do, and the rest we may gently cease to do. That is all. That is the whole of it. Let us stay a little longer in this stillness, for there is no hurry now, and the night is wide and kind. Notice how the room holds you, the dark air soft around you, the quiet keeping its patient watch. All through the night while you sleep, the world goes on turning without needing anything from you. The stars wheel slowly overhead. The tide rises and falls on some far shore. The trees breathe out the night air. Somewhere the rain is falling gently on a roof, and somewhere a river is finding its slow way to the sea, and none of it asks your help, and none of it needs your watching. You may set the watch down. You may let the world keep itself for these few hours, as it always has, and give yourself over entirely to rest. And should the mind stir again, should some old arrow begin to lift, you need do nothing but notice it softly and return to the breath and let it settle once more. There is no wrong way to rest tonight. If the thoughts come, let them come and go like clouds. If feelings rise, let them be felt and let them pass. If sleep is near, let it take you whenever it will, mid-sentence, mid-breath. It does not matter. You will lose nothing by drifting off, for the teaching has already done its quiet work, and the rest is only rest. You are held. You are safe. You are exactly where you need to be, and there is nowhere else you must go, and nothing else you must do. For now there is nothing left to understand, and nothing left to solve. Whatever first arrows this day brought you, let them be only what they were, small, honest, already fading. And every second arrow you have carried into this room, the resisting, the story, the reaching backward and forward, the quarrel with what is, the blame turned inward, you may set them all down now in the dark, like a bundle of arrows laid quietly in the grass beside a bull no longer drawn. Let us take the last of these quiet minutes simply to rest the body down, slowly, the way you might lower something precious into still water. There is nowhere to go now and nothing left to do, and so you may give the whole weight of yourself over to the bed and let it hold you, as it has been holding you all along, waiting only for you to stop holding yourself. Let the breath grow slow and long, and with each breath out, let a little more of the day leave you. Breathe out the arrows you fired and the ones fired at you. Breathe out the stories and the shoulds, the reachings backward and forward, the harsh words you spoke to yourself in the dark. Let each slow breath carry a little more of it away, out into the night, until there is less and less to hold, and the holding itself begins to dissolve. Let your body grow heavy and at ease. Let your shoulders rest. Let your hands lie open. Let the breath come and go on its own, without your help, the way the tide moves, the way the garden grew while the monk slept. There is nothing to guard against tonight. There is no arrow you need to catch and none you need to fire. The wound, whatever it is, will heal in the open air slowly on its own, now that you have stopped returning to it. The silt is settling, the water is clearing, the pool of your mind, left still at last, is growing quiet all by itself. You are exactly where you need to be. There is nowhere else to get to and nothing more to do. Only this quiet breath and this soft dark and the deep rest that has been waiting for you all along. Just on the other side of the drawn bow you have finally set down. Let the last of the day dissolve now, like the final ring of a bell fading from the air, until there is only the quiet and your slow breath moving through it, and the soft weight of your body sinking a little deeper into rest with each breath out. There is nothing more to read into tonight, nothing more to carry, nothing more to be. You have arrived at the end of the long day and the end of these quiet hours, and all that is left is to let go and to sleep. Let the mind grow as still and dark as the night sky. Let the breath rock you gently like a small boat on calm water, and let yourself drift without effort, without fear, toward the deep and simple rest that has been quietly waiting for you all along, and that will still be here to hold you tomorrow and every night after. May the first arrows of your days be met when they come, with a gentle hand. May the second arrows grow fewer and softer as the seasons pass. May you learn a little more each night, to let the bee sting once and add nothing. May you offer yourself in the hard hours the same mercy you so freely give to those you love. And may you rest now as deeply and as long as you need to rest. The bow is down in the grass. Your hands are open. The pool is growing clear. There is nothing more to carry tonight. Sleep well, and thank you for spending these quiet hours here.